Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto neglected by family and trained by Mito part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Kushina Uzumaki had dreaded this day. She knew giving birth would be an ordeal for her, more so than when any other women went through labor. They had anticipated the complications of her pregnancy, taken into account the weakening of her seal, and even kept time and location of it a secret. It still had gone wrong, so horribly wrong. Somehow the knowledge of where she would be giving birth had been compromised, and now the Kyuubi, it was free, set free by the masked man with a lone Sharingan. She could feel her strength waning, but not from giving birth. It was because the prison that was her body and soul had been broken. The simple fact that when a biju is ripped from them, the container would inevitably die was bearing down on her mind. As she lay there trying to muster the last dregs of her willpower to move about, trying to think of a solution, she could not help but tear up. The desire to curl up and cry her pain away felt overwhelmingly tempting. She would no longer be able to see the warm sunrise, the cold touch of dewy grass, the soothing feeling of running water. She would try and lose herself in when she took a shower to wash away her frustrations. Gasping through her tears, her mind struggling through details, she thought of countermeasures. The lump in her throat was growing painful as she had trouble swallowing. Maybe they could seal the rampaging biju back inside her so she could take it to the grave, only if temporarily. It would reform, but it would take years to do so, and Konoha would be ready to seal it back in. As much as she felt this to be the right course of action, her resolve was shaking, desperate for an alternative. She felt like a coward before giving birth. She would have regretted dying, but ultimately would have accepted it as another aspect of her journey. She was a proud kunoichi, brave and deadly. That was identity. Now, she was a desperate mother. Growing up alone after the death of her parents in the Ashizo massacre, she had blossomed in her heart a fierce desire for a life surrounded by those who loved her, those she could love in return. Now, the mere thought of parting with her baby boy, her Naruto, was too painful for her to bear. She loved him so much. Today was supposed to be a happy occasion, a bright memory shining away from any more to come. She was finally here, she was finally going to start her own family. But now she would be losing it all. Her handsome, loving husband and her beautiful son, all she could do for them was pray. Pray that they find happiness without her. At least she still held some peace knowing that Minato would look after their son. With a new sense of purpose, she moved, unleashing chains made unbreakable by her chakra towards the Kyuubi. She wasn't willing to let Minato bear the entire burden alone. Even if she were dead, she would still help raise her child. She would make sure that Naruto would still grow up with the knowledge of her side of the family, the Uzumaki, and their legacy. As she tried to keep the Kyuubi contained using her chakra chains, she quickly performed a summoning jutsu, causing a small box to appear. Opening the box, and she looked inside. It already held a couple of items, a diary, some money, a few storage scrolls and a couple of photos. She took off her wedding ring and her hair clip, a cute black one she was partial to, and put them inside. After thinking about it some more, she tore off the collar of her dress carefully, the part which contained her husband's Horatian formula, and carefully placed it in. It would increase the chance of them finding the box. She gently closed the container and secured the lid. Quickly performing a variation of the reverse summoning jutsu tied to the box, she sent it back so it would not be destroyed. Just after finishing the task, she became aware of her husband approaching her with Naruto in his arms. "Minato-kun, are you ready to seal the Kyuubi back inside me?" she whispered as she took Naruto from him, gazing at her baby boy intently, desperately trying to take in every little detail of his face for the last time. From his red hair to his small face with no marks or blemishes, she felt that he was the most adorable thing ever. God, she could keep watching him forever. "Kushina-chan, there's no need for you to die, and take the Kyuubi with you." Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage of Konoha, stood up and looked towards the towering form of the biju struggling against the golden chains. "Preserve your chakra. I'll seal half of it within Naruto using the Reaper's death seal." Kushina quickly looked up at him, her eyes wide open, mouth slightly ajar in befuddlement. "But Minato, the Reaper's seal will result in your death." What about Naruto? He would have to grow up alone with this burden, not knowing, not understanding what it means to be a Jinchuriki. "We need love, Minato, to hold the demon, and not fall into its darkness. I believe in him. Do you remember Master Jiraiya's words about ending the curse of hatred? I believe Naruto will be the one to put an end to it," Minato said as he started going through the hand signs to summon the Reaper. "But why do you have to use the Reaper seal? You could live on, you could teach him, watch over him, because I could not." Kushina sobbed, clutching Naruto to her bosom. "I'll need its power to split the Kyuubi in half. Half of it I will seal inside Naruto, and half of it I will take with me to the Shinigami's belly. It will also allow me to put your chakra inside him so he can meet you, and you can help him when he needs it." She couldn't fully understand it. Why was there a need to seal the Kyuubi now rather than later? They could use a similar seal to own when it reforms. By then Naruto would have grown older, old enough to understand this burden like herself at the age of 12 when the Kyuubi was sealed inside her. "You don't have to die, Minato, just wait. I'll take it with me. It will be years before it comes back, and you could be better prepared, Naruto. Naruto will be older too, as old as I was when I accepted this burden, then you could seal it within him, whole of it." she begged, tears freely falling. She was tired. Her mind was sluggish, she could not fight, all she could do was ask her husband to take a different route. To forsake your country is to forsake yourself. Kushina, I know you understand that. The Kyubi reforming would be an event. Konoha might not survive its onslaught as well as defend against the other villages. Besides, there are some things that only you could say to him, Minato calmly said, looking at her as he completed the seals for the Shinigami to appear. She felt Minato was being naive right now. This was a very heavy burden, something that was hard to understand for those who did not share it. She too believed in her son, but she believed him to be human. Not some noble child of prophecy, he was a child, her child. He would make mistakes like she did, he would hate like she did, but would he love when no one loved him? Maybe Jiraiya would raise him to be a capable person, he was Naruto's godfather after all, but what if he couldn't? Making up her mind, she did some quick one-handed seals. As she watched Minato trying to complete the sealing process, she completed a small seal of her own. She gently placed it onto Naruto's palm, creating a spiral mark, and watched it fade into his skin, all the while praying that he will find the way to their legacy using it. Somewhere behind the Senju clan compound, it was a small building, one of the oldest in Konoha, and unlike the others of its time, it wasn't made of wood. It was made of massive red stones transported from the land of Whirlpool. The Senju created it as a symbol of their alliance, a promise that Konoha would grant a home to any Uzumaki that would come seeking shelter. Inside, only a few moments ago, a small box had reappeared suddenly in a puff of smoke. Someone inside the building was watching it curiously when suddenly the box shined once as a small seal appeared on it. Mito Uzumaki studied the seal from a distance and understood the use of it immediately. She slowly closed her eyes as her mind ran through the implications of it. Kushi-chan, please be all right, she whispered as she faded again from existence. All she could do now was preserve her essence and wait. 5 years old Naruto Uzumaki was bored. Even aimlessly wandering around the outskirts of the village had lost its charm after the 100th time. There was not much he could do honestly, as he had no friends to play with, or even someone to spend time with. He always felt his apartment to be unfeeling and small, as if in the next moment, the walls would move in and swallow him whole. The only things he owned that were distracting to him were a couple of storybooks, but he had already read through them several times. He just couldn't understand why no one would play with him, or even look at him for that matter. Everywhere he went, he would be ignored, no look of acknowledgement. Even when he bumped into someone, they would simply walk on as if nothing had happened, and he hated it. He had tried asking why and even tried shouting once, but it had no effect. The old man in the funny hat, the Hokage, he had later found out, had told him that people will understand someday and will accept him. He frankly couldn't understand what there was to accept. Did he do something wrong, or was it that something was wrong with him? He wasn't stupid, he knew there had to be a reason, so he tried to figure it out like he always did. It couldn't be because of his red hair, he thought, because he had seen several people with all kinds of different hair colors from white to pink to even purple. Granted, he hadn't seen anyone with red hair, but it shouldn't be that weird, right? Then, he thought maybe it was because of the whisker marks he had on his face, like a kitty cat, but he had seen people with different marks on their face too. It certainly couldn't be his eyes, they were violet in color. He had to look it up in his books. The one about numbers and colors, there were lots of people with weirder eyes than his. He had even seen a girl that had no black spot in the middle. Later he found out that there was a whole family of people with those gray eyes walking about. He just couldn't figure out why he was treated differently. He was just a kid, right? He had seen how the adults treated other kids even when they did something wrong. Maybe he did something so bad that they were punishing him, but he couldn't remember doing anything to anyone. As he walked, he continued looking down in front of him, because if he looked up, he would see them not seeing him. Then he would feel that familiar feeling of anger and hate he always felt, trying to overwhelm him, creeping and crawling within him. He would then want to break something, lash out at someone. He hated that feeling because it only made him sadder. He had promised himself he won't get angry, he won't cry. If he behaved, maybe someone would want him, maybe. Suddenly, he felt something from his hand, a faint pulse of warmth. Naruto would have thought he had imagined it only if he didn't feel it again and again and again as he walked towards where he felt the thrum in his hand, getting quicker and quicker. He walked under some fences and through the woods, ducking and weaving through the foliage. Never did he have to turn, the path was straight. His hand was leading him somewhere. After a while, he came upon an old building behind the clan compound some ways off from their walls. He had never been here as he wasn't allowed near the clan buildings. He made his way towards the door. His hand felt a steady warmth, and as he placed it on the door, he felt a faint prickle. He was reasonably surprised when a lot of squiggly lines of writing appeared where he had touched the door. Moved by an unseen force, the door opened. The inside of the building was quite dark, but Naruto could still make out a lot of stuff. It was so cool, even if it was dusty, and maybe if he cleaned this place, he could make this place his secret hideout to bring his friends when he made some. And who are you, little one? Naruto heard a soft voice come from behind him, and he turned, prompting him to turn quickly and see if he needed to run. There, now in front of him, stood a woman. She had long bright red hair like his own, wound in 2 buns held by pins with some sort of tags attached to them, and she wore what appeared to be a crown on top of her head. Her eyes were slightly darker than his. She wore a white kimono, red lipstick, and had rhombus-shaped marking on her forehead. She was smiling kindly down at him. Seeing her smile, he calmed down a little bit and asked the first question that came into his mind rather exuberantly before he could help himself. Are you a princess? He had read about princesses. They often wore elaborate kimonos and crowns. They were very beautiful and kind. She had to be one. Maybe he could help her like the heroes did, and be a cool shinobi. She chuckled slightly. I might be. Why don't you introduce yourself first? I'm Naruto Uzumaki. He said with some hesitation after seeing that her expression didn't change much. On the contrary, she looked slightly happier. He asked tentatively, who are you? Mito watched the little boy in front of her carefully. She already had a suspicion of his identity. He looked so much like Kushina it was unbelievable. Sure, she could see slight differences, surely from his father, the blonde boy Kushina had once shown her a photograph of, but those were scarce. The boy looked remarkably like Kushina when she was this young, same pair of eyes, same hair, albeit a lot shorter, framing his chubby face, making him look like a tomato, she mused fondly, albeit with some very curious markings on his cheeks. Honestly, the child in front of her was adorable. She had watched the same exuberance and energy come onto his face that all Uzumaki children seemed to possess when he asked her if she was a princess, but felt her heart sink as she watched apprehension and dread creep into his face and voice after. She had suspected something terrible had happened to Kushina all those years ago, only for the feeling to strengthen as Kushina had failed to revisit her. I'm Mito Uzumaki. Yuzu Uzumaki, like me, lady? Do you know my mommy and daddy? Naruto all but screamed at hearing the name. She had the same surname as his. Maybe she would know who his parents were, and perhaps she could help him find them wherever they were. I'm not entirely certain, but I can help you find out. Do you know what chakra is, Katra? Naruto was very excited. If this Katra thing could help him find his family, he would learn all about it in no time. He liked to learn anyway. I guess not. She chuckled. It's pronounced chakra. Everybody that is alive has it, even the plant and the trees. It allows us to do many wondrous things, like how those ninja jump really high and shoot fire from their mouths. He asked excitedly, mimicking blowing fire with his mouth. Correct. Now listen carefully. You might already be familiar with what chakra feels like. When you entered here, you touched the door at the front, right? Seeing him nod, Mito continued, so when you touched the door you might have felt a tingly warmth when writing appeared on it. That is your chakra being used to open the lock. She told him slowly so he could understand. But if I don't know what it is, how did I use it? Naruto scrunched his face in thought as he looked at his hand. He had felt this chakra as he had walked here, but how did he do it? She smiled a bit wider. Little Nara seemed bright. You didn't. Did you feel it on your hand? She asked, already suspecting the answer. Seeing him nod, she continued, I suspect your hand has a seal on it. That seal might have drawn your chakra for you. Wow. Wow indeed. How about we try to unlock your chakra so we can find out about your parents? Naruto nodded enthusiastically. He was ready. Finally, he would know. Good, now sit down on the ground with your legs crossed and close your eyes. Try not to move too much, and feel around slightly above your stomach for that tingly warmth. She instructed him softly, and watched him try to follow her words to the letter. She knew it would take some time as children were generally antsy, more so for the Uzumaki ones. Still, the Uzumaki, were usually blessed with more chakra to feel around for, so it shouldn't be impossible even if Naruto was too young. And sure enough, after an hour or two of coaxing him gently to stay still, he had succeeded, slightly quicker than she had expected. After that, they had worked in accessing his chakra so he could pour it into objects and surfaces, the most basic of chakra application. Now try and push your chakra into your hand where you felt that pulse earlier, but try and push as little as possible. There was always a concern of pushing too much or very potent chakra into a seal that would result in eroding it or damaging it. But in this case, Mito was not that concerned over it. If the seal was made by Kushina, it should remain. Uzumaki always have possessed an incredibly potent chakra that resulted in creating more enduring seals. It was one of the little things that made their seals better. Even if someone had corrosive chakra akin to a biju, it would take considerable effort to break an Uzumaki seal. Naruto gently pushed his chakra into the palm of his hand and was delighted to watch a small seal appear onto it. He looked towards the nice lady in barely restrained anticipation, waiting for her to tell him what to do next. She motioned him to follow her as they went to a side room and stopped in front of a small box. It looked to be unmoved in ages. There was an undisturbed layer of dust covering it. Put your hand on the lid on top and push your chakra as you did before, she said as she made some room for him to crouch down before the box. Naruto quickly did as he was told and heard a slight clicking noise as the box opened. He looked inside and found all sorts of little knickknacks, but his interest was quickly grabbed by the photo of a young woman in her early 20s, smiling at the camera. He quickly looked towards Mito as if to seek confirmation. She gently nodded. That is Kushina Uzumaki, my great-grandniece. Your mother, Nara-chan. Mito looked sadly at the kneeling form of Naruto as he traced the form of his mother with his little fingers, sobbing slightly. She wanted to hug him closely and comfort him, but sadly she couldn't. It just wasn't meant to be. Just the fact that she was witnessing this scene was a miracle. After what felt like ages to him, Naruto looked up to the woman. He had many questions he wanted to be answered. This was his mother. He wanted to know more about her. Where was she? Did she leave him? And so much more. But to him the most important question was, did she love me? Mito replied without pause, as if it was natural, more than anything. Naruto gulped slightly and rubbed the tears out of his eyes to calm himself. He gathered his nerves to ask the next question, something he was fearful to know the answer to. Do you know where she is? Now, this was a tough question for Mito to answer. She was reasonably certain that Kushina was not alive anymore, because if she was, come hell or high water, there was nothing in this world that would keep her away from her child unless she was physically incapable of doing so. And there was the rub: what if she was physically incapable of coming? That was highly improbable, with her being a Jinchuriki, and having the Uzumaki life force within her. The Uzumaki were blessed with strong bodies by the Sage of Six Paths himself, or so the legend went. The members of their clans never became sick. If something didn't kill them within an hour, be it an injury, blood loss, or even poison, they would recover from it. That was one of the reasons the Uzumaki were so behind in medical knowledge than most clans. They simply didn't have much need for it beyond patching simple wounds or cauterizing missing limbs. There was another possibility of her being captured, and this was where she was tripping and giving Naruto a straight answer. She had a decision to make: tell Naruto that there is a chance she could be alive and probably give him false hope, or tell him she had died when she was not too sure herself. Come by tomorrow, Naruchan, I will tell you about it tomorrow. It's getting late, everybody at home would be getting worried about you. Why can't you tell me now? No, one's waiting for me home. What do you mean that no one's waiting for you? She asked quizzically. To her, Naruto looked too young to be looking after the house by himself and be left alone this late. I live alone. Nobody cares about me. Please tell me now where my mom is. You live alone? Asked Mito, ignoring his request for the moment. How old are you, Naruchan? She asked somewhat frantically. This was a child living alone, let alone someone bearing a clan name. There was no way he would be safe enough from kidnapping attempts. Who was taking care of him, feeding him, making sure he eats right and doesn't hurt himself? It did not matter that he comes from a family of ninjas. There was no excuse for not taking care of a child. After living for as long as she had and through multiple wars, she felt that there was certainly something about being too young. She had hated seeing children as young as 5 or 6 being sent to battlefields, and even then Naruto didn't look trained to ward off any attackers. I'm 5. I've been living alone for about a year, he said while holding his hand up showing 5 fingers. And before that, I don't remember much, but there was this old lady who took care of me for a while and taught me to make food, read and write and other stuff. He answered her quickly. He continued heatedly, not even realizing the bite he had when asking, can you tell me now, please? She saw little red flecks of red dancing in his eyes as the boy was getting agitated, and was starting to come to a horrible conclusion, a very horrible conclusion. She had seen that happen to 2 other people. One of them was her, and other was the boy's mother. Lift up your shirt and start channeling chakra through your body now, she said somewhat urgently and with a stern voice. Now normally Naruto wouldn't have done so after repeatedly being denied more answers about his mother, but seeing her now he faltered. At this moment the woman looked rather imperious. She had an air of nobility around her that made it seem as if she was used to people following her orders. Her whole demeanor demanded respect. So he hesitantly did as he was told and saw her looking rather intently at his stomach, then close her eyes as she let out a soft sigh. Deciding to look for himself, he looked down at his stomach and saw a rather large swirly seal appear. It was way bigger and much more detailed than the one on his hand. Another mystery seal on his body. He wondered if had any more of those. He could see himself covered in funny squiggly lines from head to toe, and would have laughed if the situation wasn't so serious. Okay, Naruto, I know you said that no one would be looking for you if you returned late. I don't believe that is possible. People will start searching for you if you disappeared for a long time, trust me. Go home. She gave him a stern look as it appeared he was about to interrupt her, then continued, come back tomorrow morning, and I'll answer every question you might have. Naruto looked at her for a while, then rather quietly asked, do you promise? I promise. Mito said gently, don't tell anybody about this place or about me, Naruchan, or they might stop you from coming back, do you understand? She added, seeing him look at the box, and leave everything in the box here, where it will remain safe, otherwise people might take it from you. Naruto nodded and left the building quietly. As she watched Naruto leave, Mito began to piece everything together from the clues she had gathered from his visit and Kushina's lack of. She tried to recall every minor and major detail Kushina has informed her about the village, and her pregnancy. Everything that would help her make sense about little Naruto's situation, and how she would have to move forward. She had sensed a rather big plan in play regarding him, and she didn't like it one bit. This was her kin, and she would be damned if she lost another one. Only 2 people remained of her family now, Naruto, and her granddaughter. She had to secure the legacy of their ancestors. As Naruto walked out of the building, it was starting to turn dark. He made his way through the village, walking by the little shops and restaurants, not one of which would serve him. It wasn't as anyone stopped him from entering their establishment, but when no one would serve you or even take orders, there was little you could do other than make a scene, which he had learned didn't help him much. It was an unfair treatment, he knew, and it hurt. He made his way towards the little ramen stand, one of the only ones that welcomed him unconditionally. He pushed all those thoughts out of his mind as he reached Ichiraku Ramen Bar. The ramen was heavenly, and the old man and his daughter that owned the bar were very kind people. He entered the bar and greeted the girl working behind the counter warmly. Hey, I am Give me a miso ramen please. He looked around. Where's old man Tucci? He is in the back. It's closing time soon so there is not much cooking to do right now, she said as she placed a bowl of miso ramen in front of him. How come you are here today? She asked with slight puzzlement. Naruto usually only came twice a week and never this late. She knew he lived on a tight budget and couldn't afford to eat more than he did. Sometimes her father would give him an extra bowl or two for free, but they had to coax him into taking them as some form of celebration for some accomplishment no matter how small. For a child this young he had a strange sense of pride for not accepting help easily. I got too caught up in wandering through the village, and it turned this late. Didn't feel like making something for myself today, he replied as he ordered another bowl. You came at the right time. I was cleaning my room and found something. Wait for a bit, and I'll give it to you, she said as she placed another bowl in front of him and moved to the back of the shop where their house was. Naruto had stayed once or twice for the night in their house, like recently when they had celebrated his birthday. It was a small affair with the Ikarakas and they had given him some clothes as present. He truly cared for them and was glad to have been accepted by them for whatever wrong he had done. Here, I am, said as she placed a stack of books in front of him. These are some books from when I went to the trade school. I don't need them anymore. You can have them or I would have to throw them out. They are very old. I bought them from a second-hand bookstore. Naruto looked at the titles and saw some about basic accounting, language and writing books which were fairly thick, as well as several thin books about general skills like woodworking, sewing, gardening, etc. The seams were slightly frayed, and seemed to be repaired by some sewing thread to hold them together, and gluing paper on the spine so as to rebind them. He thanked Ayam for the books and the food which earned him getting his cheeks pinched, he only allowing her to do so on special occasions, paid for the food and left for his apartment. He quickly went in, placed the books on the only table he had in his home, brushed his teeth and went to sleep, eagerly waiting for tomorrow morning so he could go back to his grandma to get some answers. As he was going to sleep he suddenly realized a happy little thought. Because of his excitement in finding out about his mother he completely glossed over the fact that he had a grandma, someone from his family. He wasn't as alone now as he was yesterday. Life was looking up. Naruto jumped out of his bed quite excitedly. Running to the bathroom he quickly finished all his daily business, and quickly prepared himself some breakfast. Using the rice cooker to make some fluffy white rice, he took it out in a bowl, cracked an egg on top of it while adding some soy sauce and little bit of salt, and mixed it all with a pair of chopsticks and dug in. Finishing it up and putting it into the sink he ran some water on the bowl and left it there. He would have to wash it when he came back, but he was simply too excited to care about it right now. Closing up the door to his apartment, and locking the door behind him he looked towards the sky. It was getting brighter by the second and still too early for most people. Maybe he should buy a clock, it would make things easier. But first he would look around the neighborhood, he might find one that someone has thrown out and fix it. He didn't know much about fixing clocks or anything about them really, but if he could figure it out somehow he might get a free clock, and it was a great way to kill some time when he was bored. He ran towards the building from yesterday, through the overgrown underbrush, and pushed his hand onto the door and letting the seal do its magic. He made his way inside and looked for his newly found grandmother. He looked around but couldn't find her. Good morning, Naruto-chan. Just like yesterday the voice came from behind him. He turned around to find her standing in the middle of the room. He briefly wondered where she came from but pushed the thought quickly aside and greeted her back. Morning, Mito-chan. She chuckled slightly. Now Naruto, I have decided to tell you everything about your mother, about me, our clan, and even some things about you that you might not know. But before that you have to tell everything about yourself so that I can tell you everything with as much certainty as I can. Naruto was confused slightly at first about what she would tell him about himself, but it occurred to him that maybe she would tell him about why he was treated different from anyone else. So, he told her about everything about him living with an old lady for about 3 years and some odd months. Then one day the lady simply disappeared. How the Hokage would come to visit him from time to time and leave him some money every month. How he would sometimes take him for ramen every once in a while. And how everyone in the village treated him, and he had no idea why. She asked him how he felt about all treatment, and after some coaxing on her part he admitted feeling a lot of anger, hate, and sadness, which he tried not to show, but sometimes all of it just felt too much. I'm sorry, Nara, that you have to live like this, Mito said after a short while. Her clear voice filled with sadness. Why are you apologizing? It's not your fault. Maybe not directly. She continued gently, for you to understand why, I'll have to start from the beginning, from who I am to where I come from. I'm Mito Uzumaki of the Uzumaki clan, went into the Senju clan to Hashirama Senju, head of his clan, to establish a more solid treaty between Yuzushiogakure no Sato and land of Whirlpools, a very small village, home to the Uzumaki, and the new budding village of Kanehigakure no Sato, created by Hashirama of the Senju clan and Madara Uchiha of the Uchiha clan and some other major and minor clans to stop the long ongoing war that was plaguing the land of fire for decades. The Uzumaki clans are distantly related to the Senju, and already had a very amiable relationship with them. Yuzu was situated in the islands, and we were mainly in conflict with clans formed the land of water, the Yuki, Hozuki and the Hashigaki before they established themselves as Kiri, and we were also defending ourselves from the barbarians of the Kagaya clan. We were famous for our longevity, life force, large chakra reserves, weapon making and fuinjutsu, the art of making seals. Seeing Naruto paying close attention, she continued, happily reminiscing about their shared history. When Konoha was established, the Land of Fire came into a relatively peaceful time and the village was gaining very significant strength very quickly, which was only natural with such strong clans as the Senju, Uchiha, Hyuga, Kurama and other all coming under one banner. The head of the Uzumaki clan, my uncle, decided to put forth a formal treaty to strengthen the ties between the two villages so we could secure peace with the clans of Land of Water because of the threat of Konoha by our side by giving my hand in marriage. I was married to Hashirama as the princess of the Uzumaki clan and not as the proud kunoichi of the whirlpool I was. She paused for a while and took a deep breath. Naruto looked at her intently from his position on the floor. Somehow he could feel this was a very sensitive issue for the woman, but he couldn't help himself from asking, "You didn't want to get married?" "No, it wasn't that. I did come to love Hashirama, and after a while I was happily married. It was my position within the village. I was raised to be ninja by my clan and I aspired to be great, to be remembered as a strong kunoichi and the greatest seal master to walk these lands." She chuckled lightly. But now here I was as the wife of the first ever Hokage, the leader of the village, and everyone suddenly seemed to forget that I was a fearsome kunoichi who had battled against the hordes of Kaguya and defended against attack from the clans of the water, that I could go toe-to-toe against the heads of these clans. I was the one who single-handedly designed the barrier that was to be put around this very village, and this barrier would provide it with the defense required to respond to outside threats. Naruto frowned and asked her in confirmation, "You couldn't be a ninja anymore?" "Sadly no." Konoha was in relative peace and the village had started working for the daimyo in a greater capacity than they did as individual clans. But behind the apparent peace, Madara was getting angrier with Konoha and its people. Why, didn't he and Hashirama Jiji make Konoha together? They didn't make Konoha Neru, they founded it. It was Hashirama's popularity that would become the problem. When they had thought of founding the village, Hashirama and Madara had thought of leading Konoha together. But in the eyes of the people, Hashirama was always more trustworthy, and thus they were more willing to follow him than Madara. After a while it was decided by all the clans to choose Hashirama as their leader, making him the Shodaime. Even the Uchiha wanted Hashirama as their leader rather than the head of their own clan. Hashirama had objected to it at first, and was willing to give the seat to Madara, but no one else was comfortable with letting Madara lead them, as they had come to enjoy the peace after a long time of fighting. Everyone felt that Madara would just lead them to another war, as he had grown darker with the death of his brother Izuna. Madara saw this as the ultimate betrayal and left the village in rage, vowing to raze it to the ground along with his own kin. Naruto was entranced by the story at this point. He had known some of it, like the founding of the village, but listening to Mito's story that had so much detail was thrilling. Konoha continued to prosper, and seeing this, other clans all over the elemental nations began coming together to create their own villages. East of Yuzukiri was formed and up north of Yuzukumo. West of Konoha, Suna and Iwa were created. Everyone had become slightly agitated. As fledgling villages, they were very worried about someone encroaching into their territories. About this time Hashirama had received news about Madara and decided to seek him out to bring him back to the village. We had disagreement about his decision to go after him alone. He argued that I was biased against Madara as I had always despised him because of the past where the Uzumaki had helped the Senju against Uchiha, and lost a lot of men and women against them. I had argued that he was the one who was biased. Madara may have been a good friend to Hashirama before, but he wasn't anymore. Hashirama had new responsibilities, to the village, to me, and to the family we were going to start in a few months. Family? Naruto questions, weren't they already a family? Mito smiled ruefully. Of course he wouldn't get it. I was going to have a baby. She didn't want to go in the mechanics of it. She would have to find a way to tell him about it in the future without traumatizing him. She continued on before he could ask more questions about that subject, but he was too stubborn and went on anyway. I followed after him using a locator seal I had placed on him discreetly, and kept my distance from his sensory range, which thankfully was not that large. I had decided to keep my distance, and had no intention of interfering because as powerful as Madara was, Hashirama was on a whole another level with his Mokuton. What's a Mokuton? Mokuton was Hashirama bloodline limit. It was entirely unique to him. Maybe someone down the generation could have awakened it, but to this day no one has. It allowed him to make and control trees. It is the strongest bloodline limit I have seen. Mito, after all these years, was still in awe about the great power Mokuton provided its user. Making trees don't seem strong, Naruto said as he imagined someone making a tree only to be burned to a crisp by a fireball to the face. Mokuton, she deliberated in how to describe it to Naruto so he could understand it. You have seen the forest around Konoha, correct? Well, all of it he created in an instant using his ability. But more importantly, you remember how I told you that every living thing had chakra in them? Well, Mokuton created living trees. What do you think that would mean? She asked Naruto, something she used to do to all of her children and Kushina to encourage them to think and find answers with whatever information they had. It allowed them to think for themselves. She had already decided to teach Naruto everything he needed to know, so he could live a happier life even with the burden he held. Naruto scrunched his eyebrows in thought as he tried to recall whatever he could about chakra he knew from the conversation he had yesterday, and the information he was given. Now, if he could make living trees and the living trees could make chakra, he could maybe make his own chakra quickly? Good job, But there is more to it than that. You see, plants and trees don't have the same type of chakra that we do. They possess something called nature chakra, which if you are able to harness gives far superior abilities. And these trees were part of himself. He could instinctively draw out nature energy without a hassle. Nature chakra also had the tendency to overwhelm and suppress regular chakra, and since the wood is part of him, he would use it to suppress other people's chakra. So the bloodline limit gave him the ability to strengthen himself and weaken others. Do you now understand why I consider it to be so strong? Naruto nodded. It did sound super strong all of a sudden. Madara, seeing that he was losing the fight, did something that was thought as impossible. He summoned the Kyuubi to fight for him by controlling it, an ability provided by Madara's unique Sharingan, the Uchiha bloodline. Do you know about the Kyuubi and the other Biju? This Naruto knew about, how the fourth Hokage, the greatest hero of Konoha, had defeated the nine-tailed fox in single combat, and sacrificed his life to save the village. I do. The Yondaime defeated it when the Kyuubi attacked the village. I read that it was huge, easily 10 times the size of the Hokage Tower. He did, huh? She highly doubted that this Yondaime defeated the Kyuubi by himself, knowing that Kushina had to be nearby for the Kyuubi to even appear. But it would be more surprising if anyone else's contribution was even acknowledged. The Hokage needs to be the strongest, and should require no help. Do you know when that was? Yep. It's October 10th, same as my birthday. Naruto replied cheerily. These Hokage sounded very strong now that he thought about it. I see. Then you see how terrifying the thought is, of one man capable of controlling one of the strongest of the tailed beasts, something that is considered a force of nature itself, when it required a Kage to sacrifice himself to stop it. Mito continued with a serious tone, trying to instill in Naruto the gravity of the situation. But even with the Kyuubi, Madara lost the fight and escaped somehow. It was not to say that Hashirama was stronger than the Kyuubi. He very well might have been, but somehow Mokuton had this suppressing effect on the Kyuubi that just put it to sleep. But it posed a new set of problems. That Madara could somehow summon the Kyuubi, and if Hashirama was not in the village he could use it to flatten it, was very troubling. So I made a decision, something to this day I don't know if it was correct or not. I used the Uzumaki's secret sealing technique, the 8 trigram seal, to seal the Kyuubi inside of me. You see, capturing a Biju and sealing it inside someone was unheard of, and only Shikaku the wind spirit was ever been successfully sealed, and, frankly, at that time it wasn't even known as a Biju. It was thought to be the spirit of the desert by the people there. When Hashirama came to know about this, he was worried. A single village holding something like this would only provoke aggression from the others. So he decided to use his bloodline to capture the other Biju so he could distribute it to the other villages he thought were large enough to mount an invasion against Konoha to force a non-aggression pact. Tobirama, Hashirama's brother, was not convinced about the distributing Biju to the other villages but relented later on. Time went on. We found out that the Kyuubi in me had certain effect on my psyche, that is my mind, as it was a mass of hate and malice. Sometime my behavior would become rather aggressive and destructive. I was having nightmares, and sometimes it felt as if I was losing my mind. Listening up to now had Naruto very worried about her, and he couldn't help but ask, "But you were fine after, right?" Mito simply smiled gently as a way to reassure him. I had to meditate and come to peace with a lot of stuff about myself that I had disliked and refused to acknowledge before. But the love of my family and Hashirama helped me through the process. Then Hashirama died. Tobirama stepped up as the Hokage. He created a lot of facilities and infrastructure, the academy, the hospital, the police, the ANBU, to name a few. He was ambushed when he went to sign a treaty with Kumo and sacrificed himself to protect his students, and appointed one of them, Hiruzen Sarutobi, Sasuke Sarutobi's son, as the 3rd Hokage. That's Gigi. He comes to visit me sometimes. Naruto told her excitedly he liked the old man Hokage. Mito, on the other hand, was not much of a fan of him at the moment. If her assumptions were correct, Sarutobi had made choices she was not happy with, and she had a feeling after today Naruto would not be either. She continued on with her story. With the act of aggression against the Konoha, the wars started again. I was growing old and I knew I would have to pass my burden to someone else. Sadly, Kyuubi, unlike the others of its kind, was simply too powerful and required someone with great life force and potent chakra to contain it. My children didn't inherit my potent chakra, neither did my grandkids. Hashirama's blood was too strong, it suppressed all the Uzumaki traits in them. They did inherit a vast chakra pool and control over it from him. Perfect chakra control was something an Uzumaki wouldn't be able to achieve, at least not naturally. But my children and grandchildren did, though it did require considerable effort. So your mother was sent from the Yuzu to be new vassal of the Kyuubi. She was to be trained as the Kunoichi of Konoha. She paused here, knowing that what she was going to say next would be the important bit that would be hard for him to make peace with. When a Biju is released from its host, the host dies, so I helped Kushina come to terms with how to live with the knowledge of something destructive living inside you, and the only thing holding it back is you will. Naruto had felt the change instantaneously, even if he didn't know yet. The story had changed from something fantastical to a story, to retelling of an event. He suddenly felt uneasy as 2 questions popped into his mind, one more urgent to his current situation that he chose to ask. Are you a ghost then? He was afraid of the answer, but thankfully not terrified. No, she said, and Naruto felt relief, which regretfully lasted only for a moment. But I'm not alive either. She continued on. I'm a part of my chakra that is tethered to this impure world, made possible by using seals. Don't worry, Naru, I won't ever harm you. She knew he wouldn't understand any of it, and sure enough he didn't. All he got from it was not ghost something something chakra and seals, and most importantly she was still nice. Then he remembered the second question he wanted to ask. Mom is not alive anymore? He asked, feeling somewhat sick. I'm sorry, Naruto. Naruto made his way to where he had left the little box. Opening it, he ignored everything and went straight for the photo he had seen yesterday. He just sat there looking at it as tears started falling from his eyes. Mito stood behind him and let him mourn. This was only the beginning, she had to remind herself. Hiruzen Sarutobi felt weary. It had been almost 14 years since he had to retake the position of Hokage after the untimely death of his successor. It had been as rocky as he had remembered it to be, and he had led Konoha through 3 wars. Sure, there had been less threats, but Konoha was significantly weaker now than it ever was. Even after coming out of the long period of warring, Konoha had always boasted quality over quantity in terms of their ninja forces, but currently only he himself and Jiraiya were anyone worthy of acting as deterrents against aggression. Now he was past his prime, and as for Jiraiya, even though he was arguably the strongest of the Sannin, he was the least notorious of them, with one being a legendary medic whose efforts saved uncountable lives and the other being the worst criminal to come out of Konoha apart from Itachi Uchiha. His actions so heinous regular ninjas would be simply petrified at the thought of facing him. The current Konoha was rife with problems. The internal situation of Konoha was worsening day by day. The Hyuga and the Uchiha incident was a great blow to the village, and he felt very uneasy about them. On one hand, the Hyuga incident was a political nightmare. An ambassador that was chosen by a village to represent them was given authority by the daimyo of the land itself, and thus every one of their move was watched very carefully. Him being able to slip past the ANBU watchers and then the Hyuga guards themselves was highly suspect. Not to mention he had met almost no resistance against the patrolling ninja, as if he was aware about the routes that the patrol took, and the one person to confront him happened to be the head of the Hyuga clan, owner of an unmarked Byakugan who had a twin brother that could step in when Kumo demanded the head of the perpetrator, who according to them had murdered their loyal ninja unjustly. It reeked of a setup, and he had a suspicion it was Danzo who had a hand in this. Clan laws were one of the things he as a Hokage had no say over, and this incident was a masterful way of scoring a hit against him. He had to take the blame against the incident costing some of the Hyuga trust. Then there was the incident with the Uchiha, which cost him further distrust amongst the people, for one of his ANBU to commit such a horrible atrocity made them question his judgment. At least this time he had nailed Danzo with the offense, though not publicly, and used his unsanctioned move to strip Root as a legal organization and make him step down from his position in the council. But it was the situation about the future that was worrying him. He wasn't as liked as a Hokage before Minato had stepped in. After these incidents and his stance against any mistreatment of Naruto, and the people who were misinformed or ignorant were wary of his policies, which sadly were a large portion of the village. He was desperately trying to find a successor for the Hokage position, but no one seemed suitable enough. Konoha had the strongest ninja in the elemental nations in every generation that were capable of turning the tides of war. That was why they never had to deploy their Jinchuriki for the war effort, something that led to the false assumption amongst the populace that the current one was the first vassal to ever exist in their village. His students were too old, and even if they were to accept the position, which seemed unlikely, they would not be in the position for too long, and anyone younger than them were not strong enough. Asuma wasn't strong enough. Guy didn't exactly command respect from those who didn't know him personally, and no one in his ANBU had feats capable of inspiring awe in the masses. He had held great hopes for Kakashi years ago, but it had been another disappointment. The Sharingan he received from his friend had crippled his potential. Before it he was developing similar to his sensei and father. Minato and Sakuma were some of the greatest shinobi Konoha had ever produced. Both S-class ninjas, without a bloodline limit, possessed everything required to be a Hokage: power, leadership, charisma, and the will of fire. It didn't seem like Kakashi would be able to gain the strength needed to be a Kage-level ninja. He was too dependent on his Sharingan, something that was not compatible with his body. At first glance he appeared to be the perfect shinobi, an elite jonin. But Kakashi was as sentimental as they come, not necessarily a bad thing. But in his guilt and sentiment he lost sight of his strengths, focusing mainly on mastering the Sharingan. He had even stopped practicing Kenjutsu after the white light chakra saber broke. Tsukumo Hatake was strong not because of his saber, he was strong because he was a master swordsman. The blade only enhanced what he already was capable of, akin to how the famous general from Land of Iron Mifune, a master swordsman, had fought Hanzo of the Salamander with an ordinary katana and lived to tell the tale. He was getting increasingly worried about the future of the village. That is why he had called Jiraiya back to make some preparations. He could already feel his presence closing by the window. "How have you been, sensei?" Jiraiya said from his position from the window. "Welcome back, Jiraiya-kun. Things could be better," he said, filling his pipe with some tobacco. "Anything important?" "There is a mercenary group of missing Nins that's been taking high-level missions lately. Mainly from IWA and other small villages. Suna is struggling more so than ever, it seems. Communication with Kiri is still cut off and AIM has closed its borders. There's a new hidden village that's suddenly cropped up somewhere and sound they might be encroaching on our land. More missing persons report have started coming up near our borders. Everything else is the same with some minor details. I'll inform you if there are any major changes." Jiraiya summed up the latest information he deemed more concerning. The other minor stuff he would send to the Hokage in detail later on. "Do you have any news on Tsunade?" Last I heard of her from my informant, she was seen in Iron Country. She's mainly touring through Fire Country and some minor villages. Only the two of you are suitable for the Hokage position. We have to start thinking about calling her back. Unless you want to make it easier for me and accept the position now. He asked, chuckling slightly. Not happening, old man. He said immediately before sitting on the chair in front of the Hokage's desk. Can't find anyone amongst the active Jonin? No one strong or notorious enough. If there are no breakthroughs in their strength, I believe we'll have to bank on the younger generation. Jiraiya nodded absent-mindedly. Calling Tsunade back without taking any harsh measures would be difficult. The Hokage nodded, taking a long drag from his pipe. If the circumstances were not so dire, I wouldn't want her to get back here anyway. She deserves to be happy, even if it is by wandering the nations. Hiruzen Sarutobi was genuine in his thought about this matter. The life of a medic nin was tough. They saw the most death. Even more so than his ANBU, and on top that, losing her loved ones in the way she did would be tough on anyone. Naruto has been asking about her. He asked you? Jiraiya asked, puzzled. That was unusual. As far as he knew, Naruto was not overly familiar with the Hokage anymore, and tended to avoid anything personal to do with the man. And that had come to him as a huge surprise, as they had been rather close when Naruto was still a child. Hiruzen shook his head sadly. No, and nothing specific too, just general information one might ask about a legendary ninja. Now Jiraiya was confused. So? What does that have anything to do with Tsunade? Many people idolize her, and that was true. She was the most famous kunoichi to exist, and an inspiration to every woman aspiring to be one. Strong and beautiful, she had everything, or so they thought. Do you know of how Naruto became a Chunin? Hiruzen asked, remembering the meeting that took place in the same room they were inhibiting, where they had to deliberate on the decision regarding his promotion. Hiruzen was deep in discussion with his advisors Hamura and Koharu, the Konoha Council, the subject being Naruto Uzumaki's Chunin promotion. He shows enough skill in ninjutsu and taijutsu, has adequate skills in detecting genjutsu, some proficiency with water manipulation, but what is impressive is that he shows near mastery in kenjutsu and fuinjutsu. He also shows good leadership skills and tactical thinking from the missions we sent him for evaluation, he said, looking through the various reports, confirmed kills and recommendations from superior officers the boy went on missions with. Indeed, he is strong enough to be a Chunin. Maybe a bit too strong, Hamura said, though Hiruzen could clearly hear the accusation in his voice. It was something even he was wary of. Not that Naruto was strong, no, that was perfectly fine. It was even good that he was showing incredible growth and was already being considered for a promotion 8 months out of the academy at an age of 11, nearing 12. It didn't seem too impressive in comparison to the renowned prodigies who had graduated within a few months after entering the academy, and had made Chunin by the age of 6 and 10 like Kakashi and Itachi respectively. But they were fringe cases and product of their time and environment. There was now a requirement for the students to attend a minimum of 4 years at the academy, and only under special cases were they allowed to enter a year or two early. Naruto graduated from the academy as Rookie of the Year. That wasn't too surprising. Every year a new prodigy was somehow produced by the academy, if the teachers were to be believed, like the new Hyuga prodigy, who was on his way to become the Rookie this year, and Sasuke Uchiha, the last of his clan, already being hailed as a prodigy in the 2nd year of his schooling. From Naruto's academy records it looked like he would have lost the title to Neji if they were in the same year, which would have been the case had Naruto not entered the academy a year early. No, what was impressive were the skills he had seemingly developed in 8 months after his graduation. Skills that his Jonin sensei was not proficient in, skills the Uzumaki were known for, absurd level of water manipulation, kenjutsu, and sealing. He believed Naruto had learned these skills in the Uzumaki shrine behind the Senju compound, but they could never know for sure, unless Naruto himself came forward to tell them about it. Clan secrets were something that even he himself, as the Hokage, was not privy of, unless not one member of the clan was living in the village. They could make the claim that these secrets somehow put the village's or other clans' security at risk, allowing them to look into it. But that would be highly difficult to achieve unless they make the ludicrous claim that these techniques were created by Naruto himself and quite recently, and had not existed for a long time beforehand. There is no such thing as too strong Hamura. The boy is loyal and has quite close connections to 2 families living in Konoha, a civilian and a shinobi one of which is a family whose clan head is an expert in information gathering and psychology. Inoichi assured us that he is stable, a bit bitter maybe, but nothing too serious that would call in question his loyalty. Hiruzen looked through the psych evaluations Inoichi provided. What's his sensei's opinion of him? Shikaka says that he is a very competent shinobi, but believes all the growth we are seeing is not recent. Some of it he already might have accomplished when he was in the academy. Koharu said, looking through the reports. Makes sense, they don't evaluate weapon proficiencies apart from shuriken jutsu, and there is no one available to teach children sealing or appraise a student's skill level on rare subjects. He pulsed his chakra in small bursts, the action alerting the ANBU station to allow his secretary to enter. Let's call him in, and see what he has to say for himself. He signaled his secretary to send for Naruto. Shikaka also states in his report that the boy should be promoted so he could take higher-leveled missions or more specialized ones. He also stated that the Genin team won't survive any promotion. They work well enough, but there is no real need to keep them together. It might even be detrimental to their mission success when they go on tougher ones. The other 2 members of the team are not that combat-oriented and would be more suited for patrol or guard duties and would take a lot more time to be ready for promotions, and should be reassigned. Koharu said as she continued reading through the report. It will be a good idea to promote him now rather than wait for Konoha to host the exams again in the rotation. We simply cannot send someone who is distinctly in Uzumaki to other territories when they have knowledge of his schedules and routes, not even considering the fact that the other nations might suspect his status as a Jinchuriki. Hiruzen was in no way under the delusion that the other nations were not somewhat aware of Naruto's status as a Jinchuriki considering the security leak that had occurred a day after his birth. Do you believe he knows about the Kyuubi? From what I understand, you haven't told him about it. Hamura said to Hiruzen again with a hint of accusation. There was no need to. It wouldn't have done him any good. Hiruzen stated firmly. He could have been trained to harness its power. Koharu said. He needs to be kept in control. Hamura interjected. He and Koharu had always advocated letting Danzo train the boy. The only thing keeping the Kyuubi in check is the Jinchuriki's willpower, and to not let it loose he would need sound judgment and connections to the village. I don't want Naruto to become someone who wouldn't consider the consequences of using the Kyuubi because Danzo doesn't understand what is good for the village in the long run. He has already weakened the village by getting a large number of strong shinobi and kunoichi massacred because he jumped the gun, and now we are short on manpower, something that would take us decades to recover from, if we could ever recover from it all because of your small-mindedness, Hiruzen said harshly, his killing intent leaking through. His anger barely restrained, making the tables and chairs clatter. The man, even though old, was the Hokage, and even his old teammates felt small at this moment, realizing that they had let themselves grow weaker with time. We had no choice. The coup was going to break out, and innocent life would have been lost, Hamura said firmly, though the palpable anger of the Hokage was making him sweat profusely. Innocent life was lost, Hiruzen stated somewhat bitterly. Losing people he had vowed to care for, so carelessly, was one of the burdens he would have to carry to his grave. The civilians who had no idea of the coup, and the children who did not even know of any conflict. For a man who believed in brainwashing and has an uncompromising belief in his ability to create emotionless ninjas, he sure was quick to reach the conclusion that the children were going to rebel when they grow up. Hiruzen was fed up with these people and their support of his old friend. He now truly believed that his teammates never found their place in a peaceful Konoha, and were very much set in their old ways, somehow believing that any form of compromise for a more peaceful resolve was a soft-hearted response and a fool's approach. But even then he could not place the blame on a single party. It was never that easy. But you must still consider that a Jinchuriki is essential firepower and a great deterrent against threat, Koharu calmly stated, trying to move the conversation back to the topic at hand. Konoha may not have required a Jinchuriki before to fight for us, but you are getting old. And besides Jiraiya, we do not have someone strong enough to contend against the likes of Killer Bee, who had perfect control of his Biju, and even those who can only just tap into the power of their beasts would give us trouble. And how do you propose we go on about teaching Naruto to control the Kyuubi? Before Killer Bee and Yagura we didn't know it was even possible to use the power of the Biju to that extent, and we have no idea how they achieved it. If something were to go wrong we might lose Naruto, and might not find anyone strong enough to be Kyuubi's new vassal. Even if by some miracle we find a suitable candidate, then besides me and Jiraiya no one would be able to reseal the Kyuubi, and the seal we might use may not be as strong as Minato's. Hiruzen was very wary of tempering with the seal on Naruto as it was very complex, and without Minato's notes on it, tempering with it might weaken it considerably. He should be aware of it if you are thinking of promoting him, Hamura insisted. As they were deliberating about this issue they heard a knock, and Naruto entered, making his way to the center of the room and stood in attention, awaiting orders. We were reviewing your application for the Chunin position Genin Uzumaki, and would like to hear your reasoning on why you think you deserve a field promotion, Hiruzen addressed, giving the boy the chance to make his point without the elders interfering. I believe I'm strong enough to become a Chunin and have achieved substantial skill in the techniques of my clan. I prefer Kenjutsu, sealing and ninjutsu, and would like to specialize more in these fields. And I believe if I get more experience as a Chunin I might be able to join a specialized branch in Konoha's task force in the future, serving the village more effectively, Naruto said. His words clearly telling them that at least some thought was put into making his request. Which branch are you considering that you might want to work towards? Koharu asked, trying to understand the boy's aspirations. It was still too early for him to join any of the Konoha's departments, but it was nice knowing what one's motivations were. Something in target capture or barrier squads, as my strength lies in offensive and sealing techniques. Hiruzen could tell the boy was trying to be as professional as he could, sadly, something he was sure his former teammates greatly appreciated. Hiruzen looked at Jiraiya. We promoted him, and given his new clearance and skill level I thought it would be prudent to tell him about the Kyuubi. I had expected it somewhat considering his knowledge of sealing that he knew about it already, and after that meeting I have no doubt he accepted this information calmly and didn't ask even a simple question of how or why. 3 days later every ninja capable of basic chakra sensing felt a malevolent chakra spike for a brief moment. We had asked him about it immediately, and were given the answer that he had accessed the Kyuubi's chakra and was developing a technique for using it effectively. I suspect he might have been waiting for us to officially tell him about it so he could start using the Kyuubi's chakra without anyone asking unsavory questions. Jiraiya put aside his thoughts on how this all relates to Tsunade for a minute and asked urgently, he could access the QB's chakra already? On his own? He can. I had to reassure some people that the seal, like any other Jinchuriki's, was designed to let him access the QB's chakra and that the QB wasn't breaking out. Jiraiya scoffed. These people don't give Minato enough credit. Still, you told me that the seal was different from Kushina's, that it would weaken over time? I don't know why Minato designed the seal the way he did. My best guess he wanted Naruto to use the QB's chakra. Then do you believe the seal has weakened enough to be noticeable? I don't think so. To weaken it considerably in such a short amount of time it would require Naruto to call upon almost all of its chakra. About 7 taels worth or more. It should still be fine. Jiraiya answered. It would seem that Naruto was quite skilled in sealing, if Sensei was worried about him noticing the condition of the seal. I could check it if you want. I would be careful if I were you. If Naruto knows about your relation to him he would likely not associate with you of his own free will. Do you think he already knows? I'm not sure. You know how I used to be close to Naruto when he was little. It started small at first but after some time Naruto closed himself from me. At first I thought it was because he blamed me for his childhood, which while regrettable would be understandable, but according to Kakashi Naruto avoids him as well but doesn't seem to have a problem with Guy or Asuma. It could be a coincidence but Kakashi was Minato's student. So you are saying that he might know about his parents? His behavior would make a lot of sense if he knew. A security leak? Or do you believe he was told by someone? Not many know about it. It could be Danzo but Naruto is too high profile for him to turn into one of his drones without my permission. He could still have tried to use the information to gain his trust one suppose. It's hard to tell without being too intrusive. So you are telling me that our Jinchuriki could be loyal to someone else other than his Hokage. He already isn't loyal to me than the bare minimum, and apart from the few he doesn't have too many connections to the village. That is why I believe it's necessary to bring back Tsunade. I still don't understand what this has to do with Tsunade. Lady Mito, Tsunade's grandmother, was Kushina's grandaunt. She was the older sister of Kushina's grandfather, and Kushina's only family in Konoha. They were very close. Tsunade and Naruto, even though distantly, are related. Naruto might know of this, that's why he might be asking around about her, the only member of his family that is still living. It could work, but then he should be asking about me too, right? If you believe he knows about his parents, he might only know about you being Minato's master and not about you being his godfather. Or he might think that you knew about him and still chose not to be there for him, but I had no choice in that matter. Jiraiya exclaimed angrily. You don't have to explain it to me, Jiraiya. You have to believe it yourself, and come to terms with it. Hiruzen stated calmly. Even after all these years he still felt like he had lots to teach his students. But maybe that was how it was meant to be. Jiraiya sat there silently, and tried to rationalize the choice he had made all those years ago to himself. It could have been dangerous to take Naruto with him, but maybe he could have taken him to Mount Mayaboku if things got hairy? That didn't feel like a good place to raise a child. No, he couldn't have taken Naruto with himself. Maybe he could have visited him from time to time, but more often than not he was deep undercover. This was the second time he was able to come to Konoha after the QB attacked. Between gathering information to stave off any aggression from the rival villages, and perusing Orochimaru, he was always on the move. He could have written letters, but what could he have said? He was sure Naruto not knowing about him until he was older to understand his absence was the better choice. He was sure of it, but he still felt he had done something wrong, that he could have done more. Maybe he might understand if I talked to him, he said to his sensei. He might understand, but even then he might not forgive you. You have to understand, Jiraiya, that he might not need you in the life he has built for himself. How strong is he now? Jiraiya asked. That was a bitter pill to swallow. Minato had entrusted him with the position of godfather, but Konoha needed him more. He was sure Minato would understand his choices. He recently put an application to be tested for the position of special jonin. It's scheduled to happen in the coming months. This might give us a more accurate measure of his strength. Hiruzen said, smiling slightly. The boy was doing quite good for himself. He had even put in an interesting proposal to open a business too. He believed that is why he put in an application for special jonin and didn't work directly for the jonin position. The QB? He recently submitted a report of creating a new technique to use its chakra by using some seals. He is tempering with the seal. Jiraiya asked hastily, some worry creeping into his voice. Not quite. It's an Uzumaki technique of storing chakra, a battery of sorts. Hiruzen said calmly. He had been keeping track of the seal, at least to the best of his capability. We should still look into it more closely. We could, but it comes under a gray area of using clan techniques and using Biju chakra. We would have to force the issue. It would be better to just ensure that he has not messed with the seal, with your notes on Naruto's seal, along with the original Uzumaki one. I could just easily see if there are any changes made to it. Hiruzen suggested. That could work. Jiraiya said after thinking about the matter. Generally, even among non-clan ninjas, information about their techniques was not asked in detail. If he gets the promotion, we might be able to assign him a mission to help me track down Tsunade. It could help me figure out more about him, and he won't be too resentful seeing that he himself wants to find her. We'll just have to wait and see. Hiruzen said before he turned towards the paperwork on his desk. The top report detailing the lists of academy students going to take the exams the following month. It was an interesting year as the class contained almost all the heirs and heiress to the major clans of Konoha, a very promising bunch. It was one piece of document he didn't mind reading carefully. Ino Yamanaka was ready to graduate. Having to wake up so early in the morning always put her in a grumpy mood. It was only a week to the graduation date, she reminded herself. Then she would be a badass kunoichi who wouldn't need to wake up so damn early. She was kind of bummed out that her father wasn't going to be there to celebrate her graduation. He was called into a mission, that's why if she passed, which she had no doubt about, they would be celebrating the occasion a bit later with the Nara and the Akimichi family. The old Ino Shikacho team was very famous for their teamwork, and even after all these years they sometimes still worked together. She was skeptical about Shikamura passing, but she hoped for the best, for his sake, or his mother would surely be on a warpath. She did her morning routine, tied her hair into a short ponytail reaching about her shoulder. Maybe she should grow it out like all the other girls in her class, and wore her favorite purple battle dress. She made her way to the kitchen for some breakfast, and upon entering she was surprised at first. The emotion was quickly followed by elation, then instantly her mood soured. The source of her sudden mood change was sitting at the dining table stuffing his face with buttered toast like he hadn't done anything wrong. There on the chair sat Naruto Uzumaki, her childhood friend, wearing his regular outfit consisting of black shinobi pants, a dark orange haori with designs of black waves going through it, and the symbol of his clan printed on his back, over a black t-shirt and a pair of black shinobi sandals. His haori was usually tied to his waist by his forehead protector, but not today apparently. For the first time in years he was wearing his forehead protector on his forehead, which was highly suspect. But she wasn't going to ask him about it. No, for her sanity's sake she was going to ignore the idiot today. The aforementioned idiot looked up, grabbed another toast, and said, "Made it out of the bed sheets, Ino. Yum-san just went out, but there's some breakfast out for you." She, as promised, summarily ignored him and sat down trying to quash her anger, rather vainly, and started buttering her own toast and laying them on her plate, and peeling some fruits. She really didn't have the stomach for eating something heavy in the morning. She looked to her plate to grab a toast only to find the small pile she had created had somehow diminished considerably. Suspecting the only person beside her, she looked towards him, and sure enough he was eating another toast, and somehow had acquired a piece of the apple she had just peeled, and she saw red. The culmination of these events is what Ino's mother Yamanaka had just walked in on, her young daughter biting into Naruto's arm, and him trying to shake her off, all the while yelping in pain. "I know, what are you doing to Naruto-kun?" she said sternly, her tone instantly making Ino let go. She turned towards Naruto and asked gently, "Are you okay, dear? You aren't hurt, are you?" "No, I'm fine, Yum-san. You shouldn't be upset with Ino, it was my fault I took a slice of her apple," Naruto said, trying hard to show shame and regret. Looking at Naruto, who at the moment looked like the perfect picture of self-pity, she turned towards her daughter and sent a glare. Her message clear. "Apologize now." But Ino stared at her firmly, not budging from her stance. She sighed. Usually Ino would have backed down and done as she was asked, but today it seemed she was determined to be angry at the boy. She honestly couldn't say that she didn't understand Ino's anger. Naruto had disappeared for more than a month now, without even telling them anything about it, and they had been very worried about his safety. She herself had scolded him this morning about worrying them needlessly, but ultimately her relief over his well-being had won out against her anger, and she had already forgiven him for it. Ino, on the other hand, was far more stubborn, and knowing her, Naruto would have to jump through some hoops to get her to forgive him. She could already see Ino was starting to get irritated as Naruto tried to make small talk with her. Ino was doing her best not to explode at the moment, trying very hard not to lash out at the redhead while in front of her mother. She knew her mother had a soft spot for Naruto, and would not take it well if she gave him a well-deserved whack for being a bastard. How dare he make Ino Yamanaka worry about him? She was too angry at the moment to care about breakfast, and even though she knew she would regret it later when she would be hungry at the academy, stood up and left her house and made her way towards the academy, making sure to take the busiest street through the village. She knew that Naruto would have accompanied her to the academy otherwise. If she wasn't upset with him, she would have gladly allowed him to escort her. It had taken a lot of her patience and charm to teach him to be a gentleman if you asked her. On the other hand, if you asked Naruto, he would tell you that Ino was very bossy, and would nag him endlessly about it afterwards if he refused, so he had given up on it. She made it to the class earlier than she usually did, so she was spoilt for choice on where to sit down. Usually she would sit with her best friend, Sakura, at the front of the class, which she wasn't generally too happy about. Iruka-sensei had the tendency to drone on and on sometimes, and being that their sensei was a ninja, it made it harder for her to pass secret notes to Sakura under his watch. So today it looked like she would be the one to choose where to sit down. Looking around, she could see that Shikamaru and Choji had already arrived and were already sitting in the back. If she were to guess, Shikamaru's mother had kicked him out of the house, so he came in early to catch some sleep. She wouldn't choose sit close to them though. Imagine sitting through a boring lecture with someone sleeping right next to you. She was getting drowsy just by thinking about it. There were seats in the middle and she could see two other boys sitting close to them, Kiba and Sasuke, and she ignored either of those choices, for the reasons that Kiba was too obnoxious and she wasn't in a good enough mood to deal with him today, and sitting beside Sasuke would not be a good idea. Sakura had a huge crush on him, and being the shy girl she was would just swoon over him without doing anything, then get depressed over the whole ordeal. She had put a lot of effort in making Sakura get out of her shell these past few years, and wasn't going to let some boy make her feel insecure again. Honestly, she could see the appeal in Sasuke. He was very cute, but he also felt too closed off to her. Maybe if they got to know him more, he would open up to them, but the boy didn't seem interested in talking to anyone at all. As she made her way to some empty seats, thankfully far away from Sasuke's position, this way she wouldn't have to deal with that bitch Ami and her clique of bullies, as they would surely swarm to his position like locusts. Maybe arriving early would pay off and the day would pass quickly. It did not. Irika-sensei had decided to prepare a class test for them to see if they were prepared to take the exam at the end of the week. While useful, she learned she had trouble breaking some ciphers and would have to revise the basic codes taught to them. It was tedious and the day was feeling far too long already. After the test, they made their way out of the building to get some lunch. Sakura was yammering about the test and whatnot. She was mostly tuning her out. It wasn't that she was uninterested in any of it. On the contrary, Sakura and her were competing for the title of Kunoichi of the year. It was just that she was very hungry. Her dinner had been rather light too, not to mention her lack of breakfast, and she was contemplating going out to the stores near the academy to buy something to eat even though she was on a tight budget. The shopping spree she had gone on this month might not have been such a good idea. Another reason she wanted to graduate quickly so she could earn lots of money by going on missions. She was still agonizing on her decision while walking when she felt someone appear in front of her with a flicker, and she frowned. Sakura had stopped talking, seeing the boy standing in front of them smiling brightly, and looked towards Ino, who simply walked past him. Naruto could feel the anger rolling off of Ino and the confusion coming from the other girl by her side. She had a curious shade of pink hair. It looked awesome in his opinion. It was just a lighter shade of red after all. Both of their emotions were understandable, so he simply said to them, "I brought you lunch, Ino." Well, more like he had asked Yumsen to pack some food for Ino, and after taking care of some business, he had come to deliver it to her and start making amends. It had been his fault for disappearing, but in his defense he had made a breakthrough in his technique, and the application of the seals required for it needed extensive preparations. Then his approval for a commercial permit had also come through, and he had to secure the channels for material supply. That had taken him a whole lot of effort. Seeing that Ino only stopped for a second and then continued walking on, he played his ace. "You don't want it? Well, I guess I'll go then. I had some pretty big news, 2 of them in fact, and you were going to be the first one to know about it too." He sighed somewhat dramatically and slowly turned to walk away. Humph. That was all he heard before Ino walked up to him, holding Sakura by her wrist, snatched the lunchbox from his hand and stood in front of him. She raised her delicately manicured eyebrow when she saw him just standing there. Naruto shook his head fondly before placing a hand on both of their shoulders and flickered them to a more secluded area, away from the academy watchers, to a training ground near the academy, one of the few that was open to the students. It was one of the specifically designed ones, with a running course, targets for practice, trees and even a small pond. He looked towards the girls as Ino made her way towards a particularly large tree and found a soft spot underneath it to sit down. Sakura trailed behind her somewhat hesitantly, and opened her own lunchbox. He could feel that she was wary of him, and he had to suppress the anger he could feel bubbling inside him, something he had to train in extensively over the years, otherwise he would have been without company. The thought of it was something he could always feel looming in the back of his head. He opened his senses, and looked at her closely, and could see truthfully the girl was just shy of strangers, and it wasn't because of him in particular that she was uneasy. He smiled at the thought of being nobody in particular, and he already made up his mind to see if he could befriend her. "Hello, I'm Naruto Uzumaki, Ino's friend," he said cheerily, extending his hand. "Sakura Haruno," she said somewhat shyly as she shook his hand. "Ino told me about you." "Really now?" Naruto said, looking towards Ino. "Good things, I hope," he said in a teasing voice. "She told me you graduated 2 years ago, and that you are a chunin," Sakura said hastily. She could tell Ino was getting angry, and she wasn't going to tell him about all she had been told. It was between her and Ino. "Yup, I joined the academy a year early, and as for being a chunin, if all goes well I won't be one for long," he said cryptically, and knowing Ino he had dangled the perfect bait, sure enough. "What does that mean?" Ino said, talking for the first time today. Something that had been seriously worrying Sakura for a while. Her curiosity getting the better of her anger. "I put in a request for promotion to Special Jonin. It was approved, and if all goes well I'll be promoted," he told her cheerily. "What do you have to do to get promoted?" She knew some of the details that went towards getting a promotion, but nothing too major. Naruto had told her there were 2 main ways to get promoted to chunin when not in a time of war. First, through some kind of exam. She had attended one of the finals as a spectator with her dad a few years back, and second, through getting approved by the council. Naruto didn't tell her how he had managed to get his promotion through the second method, telling her she didn't have the clearance for it. "You don't have the clearance." How she hated those words, more so because Naruto always looked really smug about it. As for being a special jonin, they only learned a little about the position in the academy. What every special Jonin has to do. Show Jonin proficiency in certain skills and somewhat higher proficiency than a Chunin in the other basic ones. He answered honestly. The information could be easily found in the library and wasn't restricted to civilians. How is that different from a Jonin? This time it was Sakura who had asked after she swallowed the bite of food she had been eating between their conversations. He could feel the girl slowly beginning to ease up in his presence. A Jonin position requires a lot more field experience because they have the choice to take a Genin team, and I don't have to show Jonin level skills in all the basic ninja fields, only some that I specialize in to be considered for the promotion. Being a Jonin does give slightly more authority in general situations though, but I'm not ready for the responsibility and time required for the position. There were exceptions to this of course, but they didn't have to know about it yet. Is that why you disappeared? Ino asked. Truthfully, she was somewhat hurt that he had disappeared without at least telling her something beforehand, and she hated it. It's one of the reasons. I had to up my training and had to do a lot of preparation for a technique I had been preparing for a while. I barely slept for weeks. I'm sorry I didn't tell you that I would be gone for a while. And he was genuinely so. The Ikarakas and the Yamanakas were as close to him as family could be, but he hadn't grown in the same environment that she did. While it was true that the Ikarakas were a civilian family, they at least knew of his burden, and thus would understand his absence. The Yamanaka were a ninja family from a clan, but Ino had a very sheltered upbringing for an heiress. She, like most civilian children, and even some children from families of ninjas, did not know of the cruelty and hardship of the lifestyle she had chosen. His motivations were different from hers, but he knew as time goes on she would learn and grow up into someone genuinely strong. He could already see her potential to do something great. Ino didn't answer him, but she didn't try to block him out like she did this morning either. So, he said to her, how about this? I'll tell you about the other news. I can guarantee you will be excited about it, but you have to promise me you won't be mad at me anymore. Ino stood up, her lunch already eaten, and came to stand up in front of him, looking intently into his eyes, and said, the news. And you will treat me to lunch for a month after I become a genin. For a week, and when I'm not busy. He countered. Fine. But you will help me with my training. After you become a genin? Yes. She said. Deal. Naruto said, extending his hand out while sticking out his pinky to make a promise. That's so childish. She said exasperatedly, but still held out her pinky to seal the deal. I don't want to hear that coming from you. You're still a brat until you make genin, don't you know? That's not true. You just like saying that. I'm more mature than you. You're not. I am. Are not. Am too. Are not. You're just a brat. You're the brat. I'm a woman. Why can't I see it? Naruto said, slowly looking up and down her frame. Ino calmed down her anger and tried to use one of the things Naruto always lost to her in. She walked up close to him and draped her arms around him and leaned in. Want me to show you, Naruto-kun? She said breathily. Naruto tried to calm down his flustered state. He reminded himself that he was an experienced shinobi, and he had seen many beautiful kunoichi that were very gorgeous. His mind immediately conjuring the image of Kurenai-senpai, and compared to them, Ino, even though very pretty, was lacking in certain womanly charms. He calmly extracted himself from her grasp. I would have loved to see you try, but we don't have the time for it, sadly, he said, slightly smirking. Internally he was sweating bullets. Well, that was the best he could do anyway. Being a special jonin, he was somewhat versed in resisting kunoichi charm, but that didn't mean he could charm them back. He had no one to teach him that. Maybe he should find someone though, or Ino might continue getting under his skin. There was no way he was going to lose to her. They stood staring at each other, trying to break the other mentally, until they heard a slight. Both looked towards where the sound came from and saw Sakura standing there. Blushing slightly, Ino spoke. Her chance to try and make Naruto feel stupid stopped short. So, what's the other news? And be quick. Our break is going to end soon. She hated being rushed when it comes to gossip, but she didn't want Irika-sensei to get upset and go on a long-winded speech about being a responsible kunoichi. Naruto internally felt relieved. He really didn't want to continue playing this game with Ino when he was clearly at a disadvantage. I found a property on lease. It's a great place not too far away from the market, but not too close that the others would complain about the noise either. I have already hired some workers to make the necessary adjustments. Within a month I'll probably be open for business. When are you going to take me to see the place? Ino demanded quite excitedly. She had been hearing about him opening up his own shop for ages now. Whenever you are free. He complied readily. This was one of his dreams coming true, and it made him happy that Ino looked as giddy as he felt. You are opening up your own business? Sakura asked in wonder. Naruto was very young, only about a year older than her and Ino, and he was already able to open up his own shop. That was simply incredible. Yup, I'm a weaponsmith, but won't you be too busy with your ninja career? Sakura asked with slight concern in her voice. Not too much. I'll be only providing high-end weapons and custom jobs. The demand is low for them, but they are quite pricey, so they make decent profit, and I'll still take on missions to make money. My clan, the Uzumaki, were famous for their swords, and now I can open my own shop to honor them. Sakura could hear the pride in his voice. She hadn't heard of an Uzumaki clan. They weren't taught about them in the academy. She would have to go to the library to gather more information. You could come to visit my shop too, you know. Just ask Ino whenever you want to. Naruto continued happily. I would like that. Sakura complied. She really wanted to look at what kind of weapons Naruto could make. He seemed like an earnest guy, and apparently was quite strong. He was already being considered for a promotion after all. She had always thought Sasuke-kun was the strongest in their age group, but now she wasn't quite sure. Coming from a clanless family was hard when her class and had at least one member from each one, and knowing that Sasuke-kun was from the Uchiha clan, one of the strongest clan of Konoha, she thought no one would be able to compete with him. It certainly seemed so. No one in their class was close to him in skill level. Even without his Sharingan, she had researched about it in her spare time, he was able to always win every bout. It was at this moment that Ino looked towards the sky and noted the position of the sun and guessed, quite accurately in fact, that their lunch break was coming to an end. It was one of the ways to tell time they had learned at the academy in their first year. She said to Naruto, "Are you coming over for dinner today?" "Probably not. I'll have to go to Ichiraku to tell them I'm back." He would have to apologize to them too for his disappearing act. "I'll probably come by tomorrow though." "Okay, then I'll tell you tomorrow when we can visit your shop," Ino said, then turned towards Sakura. "Let's go, lunch is almost over." "Want me to take you back?" Naruto asked. He didn't want them to be late because of him, even if the training ground they were in was fairly close to the academy. "No need. You can go now," Ino said rather rudely. All that was missing was a shooing motion in Naruto's opinion. He stuck his tongue out at her and disappeared with a puff of smoke. Ino was already used to his antics and would have rewarded him with a similar gesture of her own on instinct had he been a second late, and thus wasn't even a bit bothered by it. Ino and Sakura packed their lunch boxes and made their way towards the academy. Ino Pig. It was something she only allowed Sakura to call her, and in return she called her forehead girl. There was no malice behind it. They had started doing this years ago so that the next time Ami and her gang tried to make fun of them it wouldn't work, and then it just stuck. "You and Naruto are just friends?" Sakura asked somewhat probingly. She had always wondered why Ino didn't pursue Sasuke-kun like every girl in their class. Maybe Naruto was the reason. What else would he be? Ino asked with genuine confusion, but then her expression changed to that of understanding. "I know what you are thinking, why would someone like me be friends with someone as childish and insufferable like him? But I have known him for a long time, and he isn't that bad, you know," Ino said, like she was apologetic about the meeting. Sakura wasn't thinking that at all. Naruto didn't seem all that insufferable, on the contrary he was very pleasant to talk to, very easygoing in fact. As for being childish, Ino was in no position to call him that. Maybe she was looking into it too much, and they were just friends because sometimes she and Ino also acted like that towards each other. They entered the academy with some time to spare and made it into their class. The end of the week couldn't come fast enough for both of them. Naruto flickered just outside of the training ground, leaving behind Ino and her friend Sakura. Now that he was free, he wondered what to do apart from going to Ichiraku in the evening. He had nothing too important to do at the moment. He had about 6 hours to kill. His options were restricted because while he couldn't feel them as strongly as most people, he knew he was being kept under surveillance. By whom he wasn't quite sure, but their presence felt eerily similar to his old teammate, Yoji Aburame. Yoji wasn't strong or that skilled apart from his clan abilities, unremarkable in many ways, but Naruto could feel that something was wrong with him. Even for an Aburame, his emotions were far too subdued, though if he hadn't felt something similar from several other people in the village he would have dismissed it. Sadly, Naruto didn't have enough skills in stealth and infiltration to even think about accessing his file. He was too high-profiled inside the village for those skills to even matter. Those files were off-limits to people below the rank of Jonin. But it wasn't going to be a problem for long. After his promotion he would be able to look into it. Until then he had to make it seem like he was unaware of his watchers' eyes. They were masking their chakra very skillfully, and even with something like the Byakugan their presence would not appear as more than that of a civilian unless someone decided to look very closely. And why would anyone do that inside their own village? Still, it was beginning to annoy him, as he couldn't do a lot of stuff that was supposed to be secret. And until he was sure that it wasn't the Hokage who had given the orders to watch over him, he couldn't do anything to them other than hold out on as much information about himself as possible. He decided on the bar, the most famous one in Konoha, at least amongst the shinobi, as it only served those who were in active duty. Being among high-level shinobi would be a great deterrent to anyone watching him, and the bar was one of the places where it was hard to spy on anyone. It was made sure of it by the station umbu who guarded the establishment so that no foreign ninja or civilian could gain access to some sensitive information because someone was drunk enough to spill their guts. He made his way to the bar by ducking through less populated streets, avoiding the more traveled ones. Rather than seeming to avoid the crowds, Naruto preferred to believe he was only taking a more scenic route, even though all the scenery around Konoha was the same. Of trees and forests, the occasional glimpse of a lake or river made him happy. Arriving at the front of the bar, Naruto extended his sense to find out if the people he was looking for were there or not. He couldn't find Izumo or Kotetsu, fun people. Both of them he had spent time with while he was on gate guard duty. But he did feel some others he knew who would appreciate his company. It was unusual for all of them to be free at the same time and not be on a mission. He was going to make his way inside until he felt a sense of suffocating guilt overwhelm him, and he quickly detached his own self from that crushing emotion. He cursed his own stupidity to overlook the possibility that Kakashi wouldn't be there as well. He should have been more cautious. Now, he had to deliberate if he should go in or not. Being in proximity to Kakashi was an ordeal. Not to mention that whenever Kakashi saw him his feelings would grow more intense, and frankly he was tired of it. Why couldn't Kakashi just forget he existed? Naruto didn't need him, and whatever guilt Kakashi felt towards him or his situation, Naruto didn't want to be a part of it. This was one of the reasons Naruto had yet to visit his mother's grave, his father's too, he supposed. Kakashi was always hounding the place. Well, the other reason was far more important. He didn't want anyone else to know that he was aware of his lineage, but sometimes he could feel himself giving it to the temptation of it, to go and pay his respect. Kakashi's presence always deterred him. Should he be grateful to Kakashi or not? He couldn't make up his mind on that matter. He supposed his life was complicated like that. Naruto was struggling with the decision but decided to go in anyway. He didn't know how long he could avoid being in Kakashi's presence with his upcoming promotion. It would be hard to, and he had run away from this problem for long enough. He made his way directly towards his destination, and as expected, like he had known all along, his presence inside the building produced an unnoticeable shift in the atmosphere. If he didn't have the ability to sense emotions, negative emotions, he reminded himself bitterly, he wouldn't have noticed. Some of the many jovial patrons of the bar had a sudden undertone of mistrust and wariness mixed amongst their drunken haziness. He made his way towards the table that had 6 people already occupying it: Guy, Asuma, Kurenai, Genma, Rado, and lastly Kakashi. Pulling up a chair from a nearby table, he greeted them. "How's everyone doing?" "I'm doing absolutely fine this youthful morning, Naruto-kun," Guy said boisterously, though that was nothing unusual for him. Naruto liked Guy. There wasn't an ounce of deception inside of him. Often enough Naruto would have to feel people's disgust towards him, disguised deep within a cheerful veneer, but thankfully not with Guy. Even though he couldn't sense the positive feelings of people, he knew Guy considered him to be a fellow shinobi, if not, dare he say the word, friend. Some might consider it unbecoming of a shinobi to be read so easily, but the same people would not be willing to say that in front of the man that was Might Guy. He had earned the right to be eccentric in Naruto's opinion. He was one of the few Naruto knew he had very little chance to win against. "I'm doing fine as well." It was Kurenai who had replied to his question this time, smiling gently towards him. Naruto blushed slightly. He still sometimes got caught off guard by Kurenai-senpai. Most times it would seem that she was uncaring towards others because of her demeanor, but Naruto had found that to not be true by going on various missions with her. Seeing his reaction, Asuma chuckled, to which Naruto replied to him in a whisper while lacing his voice with chakra to dampen the sound. "A simple trick to prevent people from listening, and if only I was slightly older, Asuma, you wouldn't stand a chance." "Count yourself lucky." He knew Asuma understood what he meant by that statement. Asuma, the cool bastard he was, only chuckled more heartily. And to Naruto, Asuma was cool, well, cooler than his peers anyway. Naruto knew he couldn't take on smoking. He had promised Bachan and had read through his mother's diary enough times to know she would pummel him to the ground if he even entertained the idea of it. The others also gave similar responses to Guy's and Kurenai's. Naruto, nodding to their response, signaled the bartender to provide him with lemonade. He had leeway to drink alcohol at least, but only after he turned 16, and even then in moderation. Knowing afterlife existed, he didn't want to take chances with not keeping his promise to watch out for the traps of gambling, alcohol, and woman, the most prominent of the shinobi vices as his mother called them. While waiting for his drink, he asked the others, "How come all of you are here? Is there a shortage of missions?" He was genuinely curious. These were one of the elites and well-known members of Konoha, and the clients generally asked for them specially, to fulfill their requests. "We are on reserve for the moment unless an emergency comes by. The academy graduation exams are going to take place by the end of the week, and all of us are going to take on genin teams," Kurenai said. She was quite excited by the prospect of teaching again. The situation with her last student, Yakumo, was one of her greater failures, and she was rearing to do a better job this time around. It was her first time testing the teams on the account that it had been less than a year she had made a fully fledged jonin. "And my team just completed a mission, a C-rank protection detail yesterday, so I've given them some time off," Guy said with pride in his voice. "You are taking a team too, Kurenai-senpai?" Naruto asked. Seeing her nod, he said, "Oh man, why would you do that? We can't go on missions together anymore. We could have been the best team in Konoha, you know." Kurenai chuckled, seeing Naruto sulk. They had gone on several missions together when Kurenai was a special jonin, and Naruto had just been promoted. She had been in charge of showing him the ropes, and they had quickly discovered that Naruto and her abilities matched well. He was a pure offensive frontline fighter who could do quick takedowns while she provided rear-end support using her genjutsu to give him an opening. "I wanted to teach Naruto," she said gently. Seeing him continue to sulk, she added, "And we wouldn't be able to go on missions anyway. I heard you put forth an application for a promotion." She only knew of it because she kept an eye out for him. He was someone she was in charge of for a while, so it was natural that she wanted to keep tabs on his well-being. "They are already considering promoting you?" Genma asked in amazement. It has only been years since Naruto's promotion. He felt some pride at the fact that Naruto was growing stronger. He was one of the members of the Hokage's guard platoon. He had served under the 4th, and was personally trained by him to use the variant of Hiraishin. Yup, Special Jonin. I don't know the specific date, but I'm up for an evaluation, Naruto said cheerily. Kakashi, who had been pretending to read his precious book, was also intrigued by this revelation. He was somewhat sad that he had no part in Naruto's growth. He didn't know why, but Naruto always seemed uncomfortable in his presence, though it was for the better, he supposed, considering that everything he held dear would sooner or later vanish. Naruto could feel the rising distress Kakashi was feeling, and he had to actively try to ignore them. Thankfully it was Guy who came to his rescue. Knowingly or unknowingly, he didn't know. Naruto, my youthful friend, your flames of youth are burning brightly. To match them, Naruto-kun, I will run 1,000 laps around Konoha only using my hands, and if I cannot do that, I'll do a 1,000 push-ups using only a single finger, and he went on, until suddenly with a shout he ran out of the shop to try and fulfill his aforementioned promises, leaving behind some money. Kakashi also stood up to go on with his daily routine. See ya. And with that short statement he vanished in a puff of smoke. Naruto turned towards the others and asked Rado and Ginma, so are you going to try for Jonin promotion and get teams too? No, I like my job too much, Rado commented, and he did enjoy working as an elite bodyguard along with Ginma. Yup, and before even thinking of leaving that job we'll have to train a replacement, and who knows how much time it would take, Ginma commented. He didn't elaborate on the subject. It was a secret that he along with Rado and Iwashi were more suited to protect the Hokage than the ANBU because they have been taught the Flying Thunder formation to get him out of the battlefield if needed. I completely understand. I don't know why you would want to take Genin students, Naruto said pointedly, looking at Kurenai. Maybe when you are older you will understand the joy of teaching Naruto, Kurenai said wryly. Asuma chuckled. Why wouldn't you want to teach kids Naruto? Imagine messing with starry-eyed children. Earning him a glare from Kurenai. Don't fill his head with nonsense, Asuma, she said sternly, seeing that Naruto did look like he was contemplating the idea. So do you know who you want to be put on your team? Naruto asked curiously. Well, this year's crop seems to be good. As a member of the Sarutobi clan I want to recreate the success of the Ino Shikacho trio, so I guess I'm partial towards them. You seem fairly certain that all of them would pass? Kurenai asked. She had of course looked into the students' performance reports, and aside from few of the students some of them had very shaky chances. The 3 of them are next in line to lead their clans, and I would be seriously surprised if their parents didn't train them correctly to even pass the academy exams. What about you, do you have anyone in mind? Asuma asked. I haven't given it much thought. I'll teach whomever I'm assigned, though there is this one girl who has a high aptitude for genjutsu. The Yamanaka or the Nara kids would have high aptitudes for genjutsu as well. I guess so, seeing that both of the clans perform their clan techniques using Yin manipulation. Ino had already learned some of her clan's techniques, so she must have some grasp on the basics of it, I guess, Naruto said, remembering the time Ino had been harping about getting some mind technique down. Ino? You mean the Yamanaka heir? Asuma asked. He knew of the girl as he had seen her file. What he didn't expect was that Naruto knew her, and judging from her expression neither did Kurenai. They weren't blind and knew about Naruto's rather small circle of acquaintances. That was why it was a surprise to find out that Naruto knew someone who was close to his own age. Yup, she was quite excited about it, and knowing her she didn't just bulldoze through the exercise. She might have looked into the basics of the technique, Naruto said. Oh, so what can you tell me about her? You know, so that if she's in my team I could work with her more easily. Asuma asked probingly. Well, she's kind of bossy and tends to nag a lot. She's smart though, and if anything catches her interest she would go to great lengths to know more about it. After my first mission as a genin, a D-rank 1, I refused to tell her about it, so she tried tailing me for about a week, even skipping class once or twice before Inoichi-san put an end to it. I think she's still mad about that, Naruto said, trying to succinctly sum up Ino's character without giving too much detail. Good to know, Asuma said, apparently thinking about something. Naruto sat with them for a while, talking and finishing his drink before saying goodbye. It seemed they were waiting for more people to continue with their drinking. As he left the establishment he once again expanded his sensory range like he had done before. The muted presence he had come to associate with his watchers was still present inside one of the houses near the bar, though he wasn't quite sure if they were watching him at the moment. He had deliberated on asking help from Asuma, as he had the connections required to find out about his predicament. He was the son of the Hokage and a former member of the 12 Guardians of the Daimyo, one of the elites. And despite him being the son of the current Hokage he wasn't quite close to his father, but in the end he had decided not to because frankly, Naruto didn't trust anyone he knew to choose him rather than the village, and he sure as hell wasn't willing to sacrifice his daily life for the village he had so few attachments to. If he had decided to ask Asuma or anyone else for that matter he would have to answer some questions he wasn't quite comfortable answering. The ability to sense negative emotions was quite frankly one of the most ill-desired ability any ruler would want his foot soldiers to have, let alone a Jinchuriki. The ability just passively unraveled so many secrets, all the while it practically guaranteed the user the ability to never be deceived. Naruto made his way towards his apartment to kill some time before he went for ramen. That was all he had planned for today after working like hell for the past month. a day or two to relax before he got back to doing missions. As he went to use the body flicker technique to travel quickly, he barely felt someone approaching his position at high speed, something rarely seen even when someone used the aforementioned technique, signifying the one using it to be an elite. Sure enough, an Umbu appeared in front of him. "Uzumaki-san, the Hokage has requested your presence urgently," the masked Umbu said rather succinctly. All Naruto could feel from the Umbu was caution, not towards him, rather towards everything in general. Naruto looked towards the bird-masked Umbu. He couldn't tell which kind of bird this Umbu represented, and said, "Understood. I'll be on my way." He waited for the Umbu to move along, so he could also body flicker towards the Hokage tower. It was taught to them not to suddenly use chakra as the presence of an Umbu, as besides their own and the Hokage they served, they did not consider anyone else as friendly, and might take any sudden action as a threat. The Umbu nodded as he gave a cursory glance towards his surrounding before disappearing without a trace, though Naruto could feel him moving towards the Hokage tower with speeds that would make it seem instantaneous to those who had not trained to attain Jonin speeds. Truly an elite. Naruto mused before he too disappeared and appeared near the Hokage tower with a deliberate small cloud of smoke to make his presence known to the guards. He didn't have the privilege to directly appear inside the building while masking his presence. He made his way up the tower and asked the secretary sitting outside the office if the Hokage was available. "Yes, the Hokage is expecting you, Uzumaki-san," the secretary replied. He entered the Hokage's office. It was already occupied by 3 people waiting for him, including the Hokage himself, the other 2 being Izumo and Kotetsu, his gate guard buddies. He raised a single eyebrow at them in query. He could see that Izumo was excited and he could even feel Kotetsu's annoyance. Both of them though didn't answer his implied question, so he turned towards the Hokage, who at the moment was going through some reports. "Ah, all of you are present. Dove." The Hokage called and suddenly an Umbu appeared in front of them, the same one who had informed Naruto of the Hokage's summon, holding a file and a bingo book. Naruto resisted the urge to snort at the name of the Umbu. Dove, huh? If this was Dove, he hated to see what the others were like. He really didn't understand why someone would want to join the Umbu. The pay wasn't all that great, and besides feeding your paranoia, it didn't seem to give any particular benefit. He heard Izumo read the bingo book aloud for the benefit of the others. Aoi Rokusho, male 25, physical description him. Here we go, former instructor of Konoha. Tricked a genin into abandoning the village to join Amigakure. Helped kill 2 of Konoha Umbu and tortured a Konoha nin. Current status, Jonin of Amigakure, B-rank ninja, bounty, 15 million ryo. Captured dead or alive. He read summarizing the entry for the relevant information. Anything else could be delved into later. Naruto was confused. This Aoi's crimes didn't seem to match such a high bounty. Perhaps sensing his confusion, the Hokage gestured Izumo to read the other file he was provided. Aoi Rokusho tricked a genin, Idate Marino, to steal a secret scroll along with the Senju clan artifact, Tobarama Senju's legendary sword called the Sword of the Thunder God, which still seems to be in his possession. The rest of it is the same, killing Umbu, torturing a special jonin to try and decode the scroll. Now he understood, and he was very keen on hunting Aoi down. This was personal. While distant, he still had relations to the Senju. They had promised to provide a home to all Uzumaki, so it was his duty to help the clan when he could, because while there was no one from the Senju clan living in the village right now, they still hadn't failed in fulfilling their promise to him. We have reports of seeing Aoi along with 2 others cross into Fire Country from grass and making his way towards either Sound or Iron. We are not sure. You 3 are to go to the border outpost of Konoha and meet the team tracking his progress. Engage him and bring back the sword and the scroll if he has them. Naruto, you will be the leader of this mission, Hiruzen said, briefing them while passing the mission directive to Naruto. Naruto briefly read the mission and looked to the other 2. Seeing them nod, he said to the Hokage, "Yes, sir." Saluting the Hokage, he made his way out of the office and turned towards the other 2. Izumo, gather as much information on Aoi and the landscape as you can. Kotetsu, gather the team supplies. Both of you be ready to leave in 3 hours. If we leave in the evening, we would be able to reach the outpost by midnight, and it would make it easier to cross the border in the dark, if it's needed. The other 2 nodded and quickly left to take care of their assigned tasks as well as take care of any personal matters. They were both excited, even Kotetsu, who generally preferred lazing around as it was rare for the Hokage to personally call in people and assign them missions. This was generally done for special cases where individual talents were required. Maybe this was a way to see if he was ready for his promotion. He had said he would like to join a capture squad. Naruto mused. Putting that thought aside, he quickly made his way to Ikaraku's. He had to take care of several things as well. Entering the shop, he quickly saw that there was only a single customer in there. It seemed both Ayam and Tucci were working on making preparations for the oncoming dinner rush. He greeted them cheerily. "How are you doing, Ayam, Pops?" Both of them looked towards the familiar-sounding voice to find Naruto sitting there. "Naruto, my boy. It's good to see you." "We are doing well enough, although since you haven't been coming to the shop the business has been struggling," Tucci said jovially, and Naruto knew that Tucci was joking. After all, knowing Naruto's reputation, his absence might have even boosted their business a bit. "Where have you been, Naruto?" Dad might be joking, but he was very worried, you know. Ayam said somewhat chidingly. "Me, it was you. You were worried senseless. He is a grown-up now, you know. He could take care of himself. You should stop hounding him." Tsuchi said as he moved to the back of the store to resume his cooking. He knew Naruto was a very capable young man. Hearing this, Ayame just sent a withering glare towards her dad. Naruto might be a shinobi, but she knew he wasn't above doing something reckless and stupid. It's fine, I had to take some time off to complete my training and do some research, Naruto said, trying to pacify Ayame. You should still have informed us before disappearing, Ayame said with some frustration bleeding into her voice as she placed a bowl of ramen in front of him. She didn't need to know what he wanted to order. His first order was always the same. If he wanted something else, he would have told her already. I know, and I'm sorry. I won't go on long absences without telling you, okay? He said, breaking apart his chopsticks. He continued after swallowing a mouthful. I got the place you showed me last time. Ayame and Tsuchi had helped him find the place for his shop. They had good connections in the commercial market. You did? Ayame said happily. Congratulations, Naruto. The first bowl's on the house. Tsuchi piped up from the back of the bar. Thanks, old man. Naruto said somewhat loudly so Tsuchi could hear him. He had come to accept these gestures from the Ikarakas, although he did repay them back in his own way, like sharpening their knives and fixing their other equipment. He had been working on a set of kitchen knives for the old man as a present for some time now. They were far from finished. Could you do me a favor, Ayame? He said, turning towards the waitress. Sure, what's up? I have to go on an urgent mission tonight, and it might take me some time to complete it. Not more than a week. The construction crew I hired would be coming in tomorrow to fix up the place. Can you go there and make sure everything's fine and they are working properly? I had already given them the specifications on what to do, so you don't have to worry about anything. Here are the plans for it, he said while passing Ayame a set of keys for the place and a small notebook in which he kept all the details for his shop, and the work area in the back where he planned to do the actual smithing. Ayame took the keys and looked through the notebook. It had details on the size for the gas forge and quench tanks along with areas outlining where to place the machinery. There was also specifications on the place where weapons were to be put on display in the front of the shop, though they were less specific and seemed lacking. Don't worry about the payment. I had already given them the advance, and we had already made a deal for the rest of it, Naruto added. Even though he had to pay a hefty sum for the advance, the rest of the payment was quite lax, seeing that he was a chunin, and the position did come with quite a few perks. If he was a civilian and an orphan, he might have been in for a rougher time. When are they coming in for the job? Ayame asked. About 11 in the morning, Naruto said as he finished his ramen and ordered another bowl of miso ramen. I can do that, don't worry about it, Ayame assured him before busying herself to prepare his order. After he had spent some time chatting with them and eating 2 more bowls, Naruto left the ramen shop and made his way towards Yamanaka Flowers. Entering the shop, he had expected to see Ino working the counter but was surprised to see her mother instead. She looked up from the flower arrangement she was preparing for a client when she heard the chime of the bell located above the shop's door. Hello, Naruto-kun. I thought you would be coming tomorrow for dinner. Don't tell me Ino got the date wrong? She said, frowning slightly. It wasn't like Ino to be forgetful. No, Ino was right. I was going to come tomorrow, but Hokage-sama assigned me an urgent mission just now and I don't know when I'll be back. That's why I came to inform you and Ino, Naruto said quickly. Oh, well, that's a shame. I was looking forward to tomorrow's dinner, Yum said with slight disappointment lacing her voice. Naruto instantly felt guilty, as if he had done something wrong and he wasn't even at fault here. I promise I'll come by as soon as I can, he promised hastily. I'll hold you to it then, but you should still visit more often and not just for planned dinners. I will. Naruto nodded as he discreetly started looking around the shop, but he might not have been as discreet as he had hoped. Ino's in her room, dear. She's studying for her graduation exam. She quipped, correctly guessing what Naruto was thinking. I'll call her, she said as she left and went upstairs to get Ino. Naruto waited a while looking at the pretty flowers before he felt Ino coming down the stairs, her frustration building up. He could sympathize. Studying for an exam was never fun. She looked at him as she took a seat behind the counter and asked snappishly, What do you want? Naruto could feel the need to make a rude remark in return, but he curbed his instinct, as he didn't want to leave on a mission after having a fight with Ino, so he said gently, I have an urgent mission, so I can't come by tomorrow for dinner. But then we can't go to your shop, Ino said indignantly. Don't be angry at me, Ino. The Hokage personally asked me to go on the mission. I had to give Ayame the instructions on the construction work that's going to take place tomorrow because I can't supervise them myself, he said quickly. He was a bit miffed about the timing of the mission too, though getting back the sword from Aoi was far too important for him to pass up on. Your construction crew is arriving tomorrow? Ino asked with an odd gleam in her eyes. Naruto had no idea what she was thinking. Ino was a girl and she was weird. He had accepted that fact long ago. Yeah, I left Ayame with the plans, he said somewhat warily. Okay, I get it. Don't worry about showing me the shop. We can go there whenever you come back. How long will you be gone for anyway? Ino inquired. No more than a week. Well, you better come meet me first when you return. You were gone for months and now you are going off again, and just when I'll become a genin too, she warned him. I will. Shishino, you said you won't be angry about that anymore. I'm not angry, Ino said rather angrily. Seeing that there's no winning this argument, Naruto just gave up because if he didn't he would have to hear her nagging him that she, indeed, wasn't angry. Fine if you say so. Well, I'll see you when I get back then, he said, walking out of the store after seeing Ino acknowledge his farewell. He quickly made his way towards his apartment. A short while later he stood in front of his door, quickly going through a string of hand seals to release the seals he had placed on the perimeter, and deactivating some of the others he had drawn on the door itself by using the key matrix he had placed on his hand. Some of the seals were basic wards from projectiles and elemental attacks, while a few others were barrier seals with some alarm seals thrown in the mix. Basically anything and everything he could weave into a single powering matrix that would work without needing an active source, i.e., a person continuously pumping them full of chakra. These combinations of seals weren't meant to stop any dedicated ninja from getting in. He couldn't achieve that without drawing very large seals that covered several blocks of the neighborhood. No, they were made so that whoever wanted to get in couldn't make it through without drawing attention of half the village. He used his keys to open the door, and while walking in quickly reactivated some of the seals that prevented spying as well as scrying. It might seem excessive, but from what he knew about the Sarutobi clan artifact it didn't feel enough. He made his way towards his closet and started packing his gear. Some kunai he had made for emergency. He wasn't that good with shuriken jutsu, his stash of seals, and some other essentials such as food, clothing, his toothbrush, a non-scented bar of soap and the like. With a quick nick of his finger he performed a summoning jutsu to bring his sword to him from his summoning realm. It was a katana sheathed in a red scabbard with only its flat spiral guard, reminiscent of the Uzumaki symbol, visible. It had a slight curve to it, and wasn't like the version more popular with the shinobi, the Mizori katana, which featured a straight edge as it granted more thrusting power and was better for quick takedowns. It was also slightly longer than those used traditionally. All in all, it was a blade which seemed to have more in common with style of fighting the samurai were famous for. But still it was nothing compared to the monster of a sword his mother used to wield. One of the many reasons he was kind of scared of her. Imagine a sweet-looking woman swinging a sword as tall as her. He still had a hard time imagining the woman swinging a broadsword that big, effectively. He placed his sword inside his new sash on his waist. His forehead protector had been an excellent sash for his sword, but now he had to use it to conceal the experimental seal he had placed on his forehead. He looked at the battered-looking alarm clock by his bed and saw that it was time to leave and made his way to the meeting point. Naruto was the second one to arrive at the meeting point, just after Kotetsu, who was sitting under a tree near Konoha's main gate and by the looks of it was taking a nap. Naruto himself jumped up to a lower branch to sit down and enjoy the cool breeze for a while. They didn't have to wait too long before Izumo arrived. I'm not late, am I? No, you are right on time. Are we ready to move out? Naruto said as he jumped down and nudged Kotetsu awake. I did some digging, and did find some useful stuff, Izumo said. I collected everything required for the mission and got the money allocated for an A rank. Kotetsu said. It was a perk of working for a hidden village. They tend to provide some funding before the missions to cover the necessary expense such as lodging or fares for ships and caravans. It wasn't much, but it was better than spending your own money. Good, let's be on our way. We will be running at a comfortable pace, so don't push yourself. We have time. Naruto informed his team. They started running towards their destination. It was Izumo who was guiding them as he had the job of charting their course. Izumo, what can you tell us about the mission? Naruto asked. He was very grateful to the Hokage for assigning him people he knew on an urgent mission. He didn't need to waste his time figuring their strengths and fighting style. He didn't believe this to be a coincidence. It was intentional on the Hokage's part, to provide a team with the best chance of survival all the while using the least amount of resources. Aoi, when he was in Konoha's service, was not that exceptional. A Chunin instructor, Chunin level skills in Tai, Nin and Gen, no known competence in Kenjutsu. Izumo replied. So he is amateur at best with the Thunder Blade, Kotetsu said from his position in the rear. It was a simple line formation with Naruto leading. The information is what, 2 years old? Seeing Izumo nod, Naruto continued, he would have made progress in his abilities. Consider him a Jonin level threat. Better be safe than sorry. Now that they were quite a distance away from Konoha, he expanded his senses to the limits. His range wasn't something he could use to compete against accomplished trackers and sensors like the Hyuga, Aburame, or the Inuzuka, nor did it provide any extreme details that were hard to erase. His ability wasn't meant for it, but given his range, which was just about half a kilometer, give or take, it was damn near impossible to ambush him. In the academy he basically taught Shuriken Jutsu and its applications. Izumo summed up his abilities before moving on to other topics. He's about 5 feet 10 inches. Here's a photo, he said, passing them the photos he had made copies of earlier. Naruto looked at the photo of a man with dark green hair with purple eyes. He didn't look too dangerous or like someone who would betray the village. A good visual deception. After giving back the photos to Izumo, Naruto gestured him to continue. For being a legendary blade, I couldn't find anything about it. I didn't have the time to put in a request for the information, Izumo said apologetically. He prided himself on his ability to gather information on various subjects, so it was slightly embarrassing that he hadn't collected information on such a famous weapon beforehand. Don't worry about it. Any knowledge relating to a Hokage is generally hard to find, and considering the fact that the weapon was stolen, they might have removed all public knowledge about it. It's embarrassing to the village, you know, Naruto said reassuringly. The weapon when not in use looks like it has no blade, only a hilt. When activated it appears as the blade is made of pure lightning chakra. But that is not quite right, the blade is solid. There are seals placed on it that give it substance. How do you know so much about that? Kotetsu said, eyeing Izumo, who seemed to have become more depressed after listening about the blade. I'm a weaponsmith. I make it my business to know about famous blades. Naruto chuckled, though he did have an inside source, and for your information, the blade was made by an Uzumaki. It was a gift to the Senju clan for providing more vegetation to the islands of Whirlpool. Wow! Kotetsu said, impressed by that information. Izumo meanwhile was writing the information down. He paused for a moment to ask, so, can you make a similar weapon? He imagined wielding something similar. No, the blade was made by a Grandmaster Yoshindo Uzumaki. I'm nowhere near his skill level. Even if I knew how to make a similar sword and had the skills required to craft that blade, it would still come out a bit different. To be able to craft a sword of that caliber, you can't reach that level by pure imitation. Why do you think there are only 7 famous swords in the mist, and each one unique too? Naruto tried his best to impress upon them the difficulty of blade crafting. Don't let the sword touch you, it will hit you with the force of a B-rank lightning jutsu. It can also cut chakra easily. He continued with his description. Seeing that they understood the information about the blade, he said, anything else we should know about the mission? You know about the general lay of the land? Izumo asked. Seeing them nod, he continued, there has been rumors of a new player. Near our borders? Naruto asked in astonishment. Yup, then why haven't we taken care of it? Kotetsu asked. The 5 major villages were very particular about their area of influence, and were always swift in action if someone was encroaching on their territory. Konoha in particular was very sensitive of this issue, as it was the center of elemental nations. It was the only great village which didn't have any natural defenses apart from its forest. Suno was a desert, and was very hard to traverse. Iwa and Kumo had mountains upon mountains, with Kumo only connected to the mainland by a small strip of land owned by the Land of Frost. The other sides were only accessible by sea, and lastly Kiri was just a collection of islands. No idea. I couldn't find much information on it, so it could be that we don't know much about them. By the end of his statement it was as if Izumo was asking them of their opinion, and the other two after some thought realized that they too were clueless. So what do you know then? Naruto urged him. He had an interest in geography and the other villages, as he had spent most of his time with Ba-chan listening to her stories about events past. It's rumored to exist somewhere in Sound, a new hidden village Otogekure, but no one knows for sure, though it seems they are expanding in size. It's rumored to be approved by the daimyo of Sound. What? Isn't he afraid of retaliation from the others? Naruto asked in bewilderment. The countries of river which had Tanigakure, rain which had Amigakure, grass which had Kusagakure, waterfall which had Takigakure, iron land of the samurai, Sound which did not have a hidden village, and lastly hot water which had Yugakure, were all spread around in a clockwise direction around Konoha, sharing its borders. Apart from aim because of Hanzo, Taki, as they had a Jinchuriki, and iron which had a formidable army of samurai, the others were weak in strength, and as such mostly existed to provide a buffer between the major villages. Oto served no major purpose to the great nations, and it was only because of its proximity to Iron Country which every ninja village had agreed to not interfere with, and hot water which was a major tourist attraction, thus very peaceful, though it did provide information on wealthy civilians and nobles, that it was left alone. He must be quite sure of the strength of their shinobi, Izumo said, or he is an idiot and doesn't understand ninja politics. Kotetsu said, which caused Naruto to laugh. Sure, are you an idiot? Don't talk like that about the daimyo. Do you want to get us in trouble? Izumo berated him. Some things aren't meant to be said aloud. Who's gonna hear us in the wild, Izumo? Kotetsu said calmly, already accustomed to Izumo's willingness to be a stickler. Still, if you are not careful you might slip up later when someone is listening. Izumo insisted. Izumo, anything else you would like to tell us? Naruto cut in, trying to prevent any oncoming argument between the two. Nope, Izumo said. This way, he continued while motioning them to slightly alter their path. Naruto nodded and he focused on his surroundings as they made their way towards their destination. They had arrived at the outpost earlier than Naruto's estimate. Izumo had done a great job. They were informed that one Chunin, and Inuzuka, had trailed their targets to a small border town, and had sent them instructions to meet them near it. The journey to the village was quite short, and they had reached the designated spot in under an hour. Naruto could already feel the presence of others near their position. The unease of the two people he was feeling, if you consider the Niken of the Inuzuka as a person, was alarming. The Inuzuka as a clan were very much attuned to their instincts, and if something was making them weary it was disconcerting. He was glad that the one tracking Aoi was an Inuzuka, because if it were anyone else, Naruto and his company would have to prove their identities first before they can exchange any information. It was true the other way too, because while there existed other ninjas who used animals as companions, what were the odds of it being a dog? And even if it were to happen, Naruto would have sensed deception. The ninja and his companion, A rather large dog about 5 feet in length that looked to have a wolf as its immediate ancestor, slowly walked towards them and stopped a little distance away. Are you the one sent here for the capture mission? I'm Chunin Hai, and this is Jinra, my partner, the gruff-looking Inuzuka said. He was taller than all three of them, had brown shaggy hair and the markings of his clan on his cheeks. I'm Naruto, Chunin and the leader of this team. These are Chunin Izumo and Chunin Kotetsu. We have been assigned to track down and apprehend Aoi Rokusho missing nin of Konoha, Naruto said as he passed the man the mission scroll which contained the said details and nothing more. Hai glanced through the scroll and began detailing his observations. Aoi is accompanied by 2 others, a male and a female. I checked their physical description through the bingo book but couldn't find a match. They appear to be on information gathering mission. They entered the village and were asking the locals some questions. What about? I'm not quite sure. After some time they joined a caravan disguised as civilians and made their way towards Makari. It's a small fishing village in Sound. Going by their traveling speed they will reach it by tomorrow's evening, he said, pointing towards a village on the map he had unfurled. You didn't pursue? Kotetsu asked. I didn't think it was a good idea without any backup. There have been some skirmishes near the borders of Sound. Nothing grand, but it would be too much going into hostile territory without a team. Understandable. Thank you for your work, we will take it from here, Naruto assured the man before parting ways. Ino had woken up early today, which was unusual for her considering the fact that the academy was closed for a week so that the students could prepare for their exams. Normally she would have been asleep at this time. It wasn't that she wished to be awake, but she had some stuff to do, important stuff. She quickly made her way towards the little shop she didn't usually visit, at least not alone. She pushed the flaps aside and peered in. She was looking to see if someone was manning the counter or not. She jumped slightly when she heard a voice behind her. Ino? Cursing herself for not realizing someone was behind her, and a civilian at that. She quickly turned around and greeted the person. I am San. Good morning. Ayam made her way inside the shop and started preparing the shop to open up for the day. Good morning, Ino. Naruto isn't here, you know. He went on a mission. Ayam said. I know. He came by yesterday to tell me that. Ino said, quickly thinking of a way to broach the subject of why she was here. Ayam raised an eyebrow at that. She had thought that to be the reason why she was here this early in the morning. Are you here to eat ramen then? I still haven't figured out how to make the nutrition ramen taste good. It's still missing something. That was something Ayam was struggling with. Her father wasn't willing to help her in the endeavor, citing something about her learning the art of ramen making through experimentation. I'm not here about that either, she said hesitantly. The last one Ayam made her taste test was horrible, and she couldn't just say no to it either. It had been her idea after all. A good diet was essential for a shinobi to be effective, as they were taught so in the academy. They even had a resident medic nin to keep students' health in check. It was another one of the criterion to pass the academy. A change in even single kilogram of weight could throw off your balance and affect your speed. She might be exaggerating on that front, but damn it, she worked hard on gaining a perfect height-weight ratio with good fat percentage. It was the single class she had paid the most attention to. It might have been because the teacher giving the lecture was an older kunoichi with a perfectly proportioned body. She suspected they had chosen the kunoichi for that very reason. She had told them to not diet but also to not load up on empty carbs. Ramen were generally that empty carbs and sodium. She might have been obsessed by this point in finding healthy but delicious food and a bit jealous of Choji, who could eat whatever he wanted. That is the reason she had proposed the idea for a more nutritious ramen to Ayam, who had latched on to the idea as a fellow woman who was struggling with the same problem given the fact that ramen featured heavily in her meals. Then what is it? You know, Naruto mentioned leasing a place to open shop. He did. He came by yesterday to tell me about it, gave me the keys too. The construction crew is coming today, and he wanted me to watch over their work. Yeah, that, I want to be there as well when they come. Why? Ayam asked skeptically. Watching people haul wood, cement and the like was boring. She couldn't think of a reason why someone would volunteer to do that. I want to help in decorating the shop. I don't know, Ino. Naruto already gave me the plans for the shop. But you know him, I'll bet you that he focused all his attention on making the workshop function and didn't put any thought on the aesthetics. If we go along with his idea, it would look like a rundown smithy you go to buy hooks and plows for the field and not weapons. Ayam had looked into the plans in more detail yesterday after closing her shop, and it did look like the only thing Naruto had put in the plans for the front was a cashier's desk and a display case. It did look very dull, but he had already negotiated the payment. We can't just make changes that would end up costing him money. We won't do something drastic like that, just some small stuff. I promise, Ino said earnestly. She could see that Ayam was of the same mind as her on this matter. The shop would do great with someone like Ino assisting. She imagined her masterful skill in decoration and aesthetics to bring in more customers, so that Naruto could earn more money and not be as stingy as he was. She was planning to cash in on all the times she had to share her candy with Naruto when they were little. It was such a better time when she could eat as many sweets as she wanted to. I guess so. The crew will be arriving at about 11, so meet me here half an hour earlier, Ayam said. She wasn't fully convinced that this was a good idea, but she told herself that with her there she could put a stop to Ino doing anything too outrageous. Got it. Ino said cheerily and made her way to her clan compound to get some training in before the meeting. She had about 3 hours time to complete some taijutsu training as well as some target practice, and then shower. She wasn't going to be sweaty all day long, if she could help it. They had a small personal area behind their house where she was allowed to practice. There were some bigger, proper training grounds in the compound as well, but those were only open for people who were chunin or above. Greeting her mother who was still working in the kitchen, it was still early in the morning after all and their shop wasn't opened until later if her father was out on missions. She made her way to their backyard. A few years ago, when Naruto was still in the academy, he was employed to help open and close the shop, moving stuff from the back, cleaning, and watering the plants, but he had never manned the counter even when he was on a holiday. She missed those days as she didn't have to do too much of the boring stuff around the shop. It was only because of her exams was she free from doing any of it for a while. She wanted to get as much training done as she could, so she could be the kunoichi of the year. It was a tough competition. Sakura had mad brains on her for the technical aspect of the shinobi life. Ino might have an edge on her on the physical aspect of their training, and even then it was not by much. The only thing she could say for certain that she was good at was shuriken jutsu. She was the top scorer on those tests, sometimes even tying with Sasuke. She would have loved to be the rookie of the year, but Sasuke was leagues ahead of her in taijutsu. His style was far too effective against the academy style she and the others used. She had asked her father to teach her a more effective style, but the Yamanaka taijutsu wasn't meant for frontal confrontation, and was only effective when used in conjunction with their clan's techniques, something she either didn't know or was not allowed to use in the academy. The only one capable of giving Sasuke any problem in taijutsu was Kiba, but he was very weak in the other areas of the academy. She pulled out her kunai and shuriken and began practicing with fervor. The fact that they were traveling as ninjas as opposed to their targets had helped them reach the village of Makari before the merchant contingent. It was still early in the afternoon. They would have reached the place before if they hadn't stopped to rest for the night. They had rented a small room in using the money they were provided for the mission, and the three of them were currently occupying it so that they could plan their next step. Naruto had never been someone who could make plans that had 100 variations, steps ahead of steps, unlike his Jonin sensei. Shikaka was an intelligent man, but he was not wise. He needed someone with a similar mindset as his own to be able to teach them effectively. But Naruto had learned two important things from him, well, not from him per se but from observing him. One of them being to not give his opponent the time to prepare, and the other would be to limit the amount of information they have access to. He was certain the reason for his placement in Shikaka's team was so that the man could keep an eye on him. It didn't matter, he mused, he needed Konoha as much as Konoha needed him. So, what's the plan? Kotetsu asked. Should we ambush them in the village? Though it could be problematic to fight here. Izumo supplemented his opinion. I said that they might be here on an information-gathering mission. We could work with that, Naruto said. He really didn't want to put civilians in danger. What do you mean? We could be more overt. Give them a target to spy on. These are aiming, they might be confident in their ambush tactics. We could easily lead them towards the outskirts and take them in. Naruto was confident in his plan. Shinobi from AIM were notoriously hired for assassination missions between all the hidden villages and thus were sure of their ability to ambush others. What if they are successful in taking us by surprise? Kotetsu asked. They won't be able to. We'll keep tabs on them. Seeing that they were still skeptical, he added, trust me, it could work, but what if we catch the attention of someone else? Izumo said as he analyzed all the details of their mission. We don't know how strong they are, and considering the fact that we don't have a number advantage over them, this is the only plan I could think of that might work with minimal collateral damage. Sound is in a treaty with Konoha, we can't just wreak havoc here. If we try anything when they are alert, we might not be able to take them on swiftly. Besides, when has there ever been a plan that had a guaranteed outcome for success? Naruto tried to persuade his companions. He could have forced them to follow his orders considering the fact that he was leading the team, but voluntary cooperation went further than forced coercion. I'm in, Kotetsu said. He was convinced. He had known Naruto for quite some time now, and knew he would not put their lives in unnecessary risk. Izumo thought for a while and nodded. Let's iron out the details then. They had decided to be brazen about their presence in the village. Considering the fact that Aoi had been a Chunin instructor only a couple years back, it was pretty safe to assume that he knew about Izumo and Kotetsu being Chunin at that time. Since both of them were not in the bingo book and weren't famous for their strength, the Ainin wouldn't be wary of taking them on. Naruto's presence on the other hand was dubious. Naruto didn't remember Aoi being his Chunin instructor in the academy, so there was a chance that Aoi didn't know of him. But considering the fact that he was a Jinchuriki, the chance of that was pretty low. Everyone in Konoha and their mother knew of him. So as not to scare them away with the prospect of facing a Jinchuriki, it was decided that Naruto would be somewhat disguised. It was just him wearing a traveling cloak. It wasn't very elaborate, but considering the fact Naruto was going to mostly stay in their room until it was time to leave, it shouldn't matter much. Since he had a stature of someone young, there was a good chance that they would not consider him a threat and look into his identity too much. It was very rare for someone young to have considerable strength, after all. A team of 2 Chunin and maybe another Chunin, but probably a Genin, didn't look too threatening anyway. They had made it inside the village quite easily. Aoi was sure that the rumors about someone starting a village in Sound was bogus. The security around the borders had been very lax. He had been sent to investigate and sabotage the shinobi of sound if the opportunity presented itself. The other two in his team, Chunins he thought disdainfully, were unnecessary attachments in his opinion. With the sword of the Thunder God in his hands he was invincible. He sincerely felt that the mission was beneath his stature, but since it was issued to him by the higher-ups he couldn't dismiss it. Even though he was virtually invincible with the sword in his possession, he was still weary of facing God and his angel. It was tedious for him to travel at a civilian pace, but for the sake of gathering information easily it was something that was essential. Aoi assigned the other two to gather information, while he rested in one of the small inns in the village. The Chunin were much better equipped in information gathering than he was. It was relatively late at night when the two came back to report their findings. Apparently recently some Konoha shinobi have arrived in the village and were asking questions. From the description he was provided he easily guessed their identities: Izumo and Kotetsu, the gate guards from Konoha. Talentless trash. They didn't have any ambition and were content with mediocrity. They were weak though, and it would be beneficial to interrogate them and find out whatever information they have gathered. And this time he would make sure that these Konoha trash do not escape. He assigned the Chunin to keep watch on the Konoha shinobi. They would strike when they are in a more secluded area. It wasn't late into the next morning that he was notified about their target's movements. They were leaving the village, and it was time to go on a hunt. Having a massive malicious monster stuck inside you lends a certain perspective. You start to appreciate the small things in life. Sure, having a Biju came with a slew of negatives, but he had long ago cultivated the mindset to look at the bright side of things. It was all he could do at the time to come to terms with his situation. The ability to sense negative emotions was by far the greatest boon, and the other one was something his Bachan hadn't told him about at first. If he had known about it he might not have gotten the ability to be as potent as he had. Chakra was the product of the spiritual as well as the physical. Sometimes knowing the outcome of your endeavor affects the outcome itself. If he had known that he would gain something from facing the Kyubi he might have failed. He could still her soothing voice providing him with the strength he needed to work on his fears. Narukuin, Kyubi as a Biju is the strongest there is, and the hate and bloodlust it contains is otherworldly. Now, it might have been without your consent that you have been given this burden, but life is rarely fair no matter how much we wish. She said sadly. That is why now that you are its jailer you have to be willing to face it. The thing that prevents the Biju from escaping is not the seal but your own will to contain it. No matter how strong the seal, you are what stands between him and the world outside. You must remember those who love you, Neru, when you feel yourself wavering. Remember me, remember your mother. She had instructed him as he sat down and meditated to prepare for the confrontation. It had only been mildly successful at first. He had made it into the seal, but to feel the sheer hatred and malice of the greatest Biju wasn't easy, and he had lost consciousness in mere seconds. He had only been 10 at the time after all. But he was an Uzumaki, and if nothing else he was persistent, unyielding, and with time the exercise had been fruitful. Then again, to combat against someone's strong destructive intent was to produce your own. Now Naruto shouted as he felt the squad of the Ainin begin to move for their ambush. He saw Aoi standing behind the trees partially obscured by foliage, throw his umbrella into the air. Naruto unleashed one of his trump cards, focusing on his target, so Izumo and Kotetsu wouldn't get caught into its grasp. As he ran forward feeling the ground beneath him crumble, Aoi had just launched his specially designed umbrella to release a barrage of poisoned Saban, and had just started to raise his hand, already forming the hand sign required to release the mechanism seal placed on it. Evidently the enemy had been aware of their ambush. For how long he was not sure, but frankly he didn't believe it mattered much. That thought only lasted until he saw the third member of the Konoha team, clearly a teenager, run towards him and unleash what felt like pure death, cracking the ground beneath the monster's feet. He felt his body seize, as if an unbearable pressure was weighing down on his mind, filling his head with images of his own death. Though what made the experience all the more sickening was the voice, similar to his own, whispering sweet words of blissful release. But he wasn't a jonin for nothing, and he started telling his body to move, trying to force it into motion. He was very much unwilling to let go of his life. Naruto made his way towards Aoi. His tactic had left the opposite team vulnerable. He was a big advocate of shock and awe, and frankly the pressure he could produce would even stun a seasoned jonin for a few seconds, and Aoi or his team weren't at the level of an elite by the looks of it. He saw Kotetsu launch his mace, which greatly resembled a conch shell, towards his opponent, and heard Izumo launch a jutsu, if his shout of water release, starch syrup capturing field was any indication, towards the kunoichi. He focused his attention on Aoi, who was struggling to release himself from the hold his own primal fear had placed upon his body. It was a shame that the distance between them had been too great and filled with minor obstacles, or else it would have been already over. They had greatly debated on how they would go on about engaging the enemy. Should they gang up on Aoi, or should they take out the two unknowns, who could be stronger and more dangerous than the sword-carrying traitor of Konoha? In the end, Naruto had sensed Aoi's disdain towards his teammates, and he had decided to go for individual targets, gambling on the fact that the others were weaker and Aoi would be the real threat, and thus he had communicated his plan between them through discreet hand signs. He unsheathed his sword as he neared Aoi's position, and like every other time in the past he had used his sword, he couldn't help but marvel at his own creation. It was an azure-colored blade. Controlled oxidation was a wonderful thing when you have an innate grasp of the blade material, patterned with little swirls of oceanic blue giving the appearance of little whirlpools. He had introduced those to the billet while making the blade. The tsuba, guard, of the sword made of blackened chakra-conducting steel was a flat spiral, and looked remarkably like the Uzumaki clan symbol. Similarly, the tsuka, handle, of his katana was made using the wood of the tree used to make chakra paper covered by the samigawa, sharkskin or ray skin, given to him by his summons. It was a light blue scaly material, the skin of an elder of the serpent clan, all of it held in place by a traditional ito, braid. The moment he reached Aoi he went for a swipe, trying to keep the wound he would inflict to be shallow. Aoi by this time had managed to gain some control of his body and stumbled back clumsily to avoid being bisected. He pulled out his sword and activated it, making the blade appear. Naruto had to hold back his anger, as he could already feel the steady thrum of power trying to push through and rip apart the offending man in front of him who dared steal something from his family. He could already see the small bright spots appear in his vision, lighting the world around him to give him better vision, before he clamped down on his unnatural source of power. He hastily took a step back so as to give himself some room to settle his thoughts. He observed his opponent. Aoi didn't seem to have a swordsman's stance. It was more of a ninja wielding any other weapon rather than using a stance one required for such a specialized sword. This was good. Not only would Aoi be unable to exercise the full capability of the weapon, he was fighting against someone proficient in kenjutsu. Ducking under Aoi's strike, Naruto went for a leg sweep, forcing Aoi to create some distance by jumping back. Naruto sensed that Kotetsu was done with his opponent, but Izumo seemed to be struggling. Seeing that Aoi was setting himself for a charge in his direction, he went with the quick and dirty method to buy himself some time. With enough practice, any jutsu could be used without hand signs. It just required sufficient chakra, the control over it, and lastly molding it in the peculiar way it was required for the technique to work. Naruto didn't have the control for it to be efficient, but who needs efficiency when you have chakra in abundance? He cupped his left hand in front of his mouth, all the while molding his chakra, and released several large bullets, made of water, in front of him. Of course Aoi wasn't stupid. He chose to dodge the jutsu rather than try cutting it with his sword, even though he was perfectly capable of doing so, and would have maintained his speed in the process, but lightning and water was not a good match when you are effectively holding on to a live wire of sorts. Izumo was having some trouble with his opponent. At first they had successfully gained the initiative in battle, discounting the fact they had faltered in the beginning when Naruto's rage washed over the area. Even if they were not the target, it still felt overwhelming. Izumo had targeted the kunoichi while releasing his water jutsu. It was designed to capture targets quick and easy. What was surprising was that the woman had been the one to recover the quickest. She quickly threw some kunai in his direction while jumping up to get out of the range of his jutsu. A wave of sticky syrup washed over where she was standing just a moment before. Weaving through the several kunai thrown at him, he advanced towards her while pulling out his kasari. The chain had both of its ends weighted. He was by no means a frontline fighter, it was more of Kotetsu's forte. He was the support in most situations, and in those rare occasions where he went for a frontal assault it was in combination with Kotetsu. So, a kasari was a good weapon for him. It provided range and maneuverability, forcing his opponents to make wider motions to evade. Now comfortably in range of the kunoichi, he sent one of the weighted ends of his chain forward. Expecting the kunoichi to dodge to the side, he subtly yanked the chain in his hand to make it sweep across to the side following her. He surreptitiously controlled his earlier water jutsu as he had not released his hold over it. The slime-like water burrowed underground to move behind his opponent. The ongoing control of his jutsu was a trade-off over his ability to cast another one. The kunoichi ducked under the sweeping chain, making several hand signs before she felt something off with her surroundings. It was because of the various battles she had been that on pure instinct she abandoned her jutsu and slapped her hands on the ground. It wasn't a jutsu but pure earth manipulation that caused the earth around her to rise to a few feet in height, surrounding her with hardened walls. It was the second stage of elemental manipulation one learned when they wanted to familiarize themselves with molding earth-natured chakra. She saw the quick-moving water jutsu halt just behind her as the ground it was burrowing through had hardened. That had been too close for her comfort. If she hadn't been so quick it would have been over for her. Izumo cursed under his breath. She had to be an earth user. He didn't know how she escaped his technique, but the fight wasn't going as he had envisioned. She had somehow disabled his jutsu by using the earth chakra to halt its progress. Seeing the woman pull out her tanto, presumably to engage him in close-quarter combat, he thought of his next step until he felt the hold on his jutsu disappear. He yanked his chain back in preparation of whatever was to come, only to falter when his jutsu morphed into the form of Naruto and latched onto the kunoichi before bursting, capturing the kunoichi by halting her movement. Izumo hastily flickered behind her and shook of the brief rigidness that came over his body, a side effect of using high-speed movement like substitution or body flicker, before knocking her out using one of the weights at the end of his chain. He was left wondering at the amount of chakra and proficiency it would require to overpower and manipulate someone else's jutsu for your own purpose. He knew Naruto was also skilled in water manipulation, as they had often discussed it amongst themselves as fellow users of water-style techniques, but he wasn't expecting him to be so good. He quickly went on to tie up the kunoichi before he would go help the others. It wouldn't be fun if the kunoichi woke up when they were focused on defeating her teammates. Pulsing his chakra to make his water clone burst, Naruto prayed that his little gambit had worked in helping Izumo defeat the enemy Nin. As he felt the kunoichi lose consciousness, he started running towards Aoi to finish his battle. "You should give up, boy, with the sword of the Thunder God in my hands I'm invincible," Aoi said as he started hacking towards Naruto. "Is that so? From the looks of it you are just swinging the sword wildly," Naruto calmly said as he dodged the oncoming sword strikes, although it was a little annoying that he couldn't try and parry the opponent's sword and strike back. "It's only a matter of time before you fall to this sword brat," Aoi sneered. He might have been frightened before, but as he pushed the boy back he felt stupid, to think the boy had scared him with his little trick. "You know, seeing you swing that sword is embarrassing." Naruto quickly stepped in and swung his swords diagonally as if to cleave through him. Aoi brought up his own sword to block the incoming strike. "It's over," he thought smugly, as he knew when the two swords connected the boy would be electrocuted. He was preparing to pump more chakra into the sword to increase its power when his opponent's sword disappeared from his sight, only to reappear when he felt it cutting into his body. He felt extreme pain rush through his body as he heard in a cold whisper, "In release, vanishing strike," before fainting. Naruto sheathed his sword and crouched down to check up on the prone form of his opponent to inspect his wounds. He had made sure to not make the cut go in too deep by blunting the edge of his sword. Aoi was bleeding, but he would survive. Capturing an enemy shinobi was always more profitable than killing them. Information on other hidden villages was precious after all. Considering the fact that Aoi was a missing Nin first, there was no real consequence of capturing him. His two teammates were aiding a criminal. Whether they were following official orders or not was a non-factor. He placed a chakra suppression seal and a disruption seal on his back. Both of them were ready-made seals drawn on paper, and unlike the ones which were customized based on a person's chakra network, these were less effective but still required enough skill to remove. Picking him up, he made his way towards where his teammates had gathered, and they were just done tying up their prisoners. He gently placed him on the ground, and without a word Kotetsu started tying up Aoi with ninja wires. "Are you injured?" Kotetsu asked. "No, I'm fine, didn't even get a scratch." "What about you two?" Naruto replied. "I had an easy fight. The guy wasn't even able to move before I hit him. I had just arrived as Izumo finished his fight. I was struggling a bit, but thanks to you it didn't last long. I am kinda disappointed though. The idiot didn't know how to use the sword at all." Naruto grumbled. He had given the sword a cursory glance and there were very minute fractures on the seals. "You have it then?" Izumo asked excitedly. "It wasn't every day that you'd get to see a legendary weapon." Naruto pulled out the hilt from inside his haori and activated the seal on it to release the blade. He spoke as the others looked at it with awe. "The idiot didn't take care of it. 1 or 2 use in battle and it's going to break." "It can't be repaired?" Kotetsu asked as he went on to bandaging Aoi's wounds. With this much damage, the only way to salvage it would be to remake it. He had wanted to say reforge, but he wasn't quite sure if the sword was ever forged in the first place. He took one last look at the sword before storing it inside a storage scroll. He handed Izumo and Kotetsu his restriction seals to place them upon their prisoners. Moving live prisoners was always a pain in the ass because unlike dead bodies you can't just shove them into scrolls. He was about to ask if they were ready to leave when he felt people enter his sensory range moving towards their direction. "Incoming, multiple shinobi, they aren't friendly," Naruto said quickly as he formed a single hand seal, causing a small wall of water to appear in front of him. He bit his thumb and sped through another set of hand seals, this time using both of his hands, before slamming them onto the side of the small pool of water. There was a puff of smoke inside the water before it came down, losing its cube-like form. "Is that a snake, Naruto?" Izumo asked nervously. Snakes had a very bad connotation in Konoha, as Orochimaru was the only one who held the scroll to sign the summoning contract. Izumo had to step back in alarm when the snake hissed in his direction, clearly displeased with his question, showing rows of jagged teeth. It was about 4 feet in length, and had a snout like a crocodile, and small ridges going down the back of its spine. "No, Wemi-chan here is a sea serpent," Naruto said absent-mindedly before turning towards his summon. "Can you take these 3 back with you? I have to keep them alive." He hated the fact that he had to show the others that he was in possession of a summoning contract. "I can, young master," Ami replied before opening her jaw wide and swallowing the 3 prisoners, effectively traumatizing Izumo and Kotetsu before disappearing in a puff of smoke. "Get ready, they are here," Naruto said before his sword flashed forward, striking the shuriken out of the air, bisecting them with ease. Out of the corner of his eyes he saw the pieces of the broken shuriken shatter into pink crystal-like fragments before disappearing. Mito looked at her boy. He had been depressed for days now, crying whenever he thought she wasn't looking. It broke her heart these days to see him with perpetually swollen eyes, his cheeks stained with dried tears. She just wished that there was another way, but her time was up. Her jutsu was failing. She had spent all she had in trying to teach him everything. She tried to fill in the void that was created in him through a result of willful ignorance, misunderstanding, neglect, and the lack of will to do what was right. They had tried to cover everything they could in that short period of time together. Even after all these life-shaping lessons, Naruto still didn't feel ready to grow up without her. With each failure she would hold him up and through sheer presence alone fill him with the determination to overcome. After living through such care he felt like an addict already dreading the withdrawal. The parting sorrow was true for Mito as well. While she did have faith in him, she couldn't help but worry. Naruto was her greatest legacy. Kushina would have been great too. She was gifted with intellect and will to lead the Uzumaki back to their glory, but the timing of the events to come had not been kind to both of them. Kushina had come to Konoha when Yuzushiogakure was still standing strong. It was because of this that when she was under Mito's tutelage there had been no urgency, or even need to, make her the spearhead of the Yuzu legacy. Mito was content to let her grow by herself and be whatever she wanted to be, but once the news of Yuzu's fall came, everything had changed. Mito was out of time and Kushina was devastated. Time was a cruel mistress. Mito had tried to delay the inevitable as much as she could, but she had to pass on her burden, and with no one to look after her, leave Kushina to the wolves. The village refused her the opportunity to grow and live out her dream. Who would be willing to follow her as the Hokage if she didn't have the experience and reputation to back it up? She was hidden from the world and denied the life of a kunoichi. She was a nobody, and the scattered remains of her clan didn't deem her strong enough to provide them shelter and peace. When Mito met Kushina again years later, she had changed too much. She had given up on her old dream and she was now content on passing the opportunity to her would-be husband. She seemed satisfied with the idea of forever being in his shadow and was unwilling to even entertain the idea of fighting for the title of Hokage. But Mito wasn't disappointed, at least not with Kushina, because she had gone through something similar. After years of being married to Hashirama, she had come to appreciate her own slice of heaven surrounded by her growing family. Kushina had similarly given up her old dream to embrace a new one. She wanted a family and Mito could understand her. She only wished Kushina would find similar happiness as she did for the rest of her life. There was no shame in pursuing something short of being the best or being the strongest and want for something simpler in life. But Naruto was different from them. He had no choice. He would be a shinobi and that was the end of it. He couldn't choose to be a painter, a baker, a merchant, a doctor or anything else. He was doomed to be a shinobi from the day he was born because it was a shinobi who endured, and endure he did. He was forced to carry the burden of the Kyuubi as it was thrust upon him without his knowledge, without his consent, and Naruto was left to live with the consequence of it. His whole life written by someone else. The world knew who he was and he would always have to face his status as the container of the mightiest beast. Only in death would he be able to lay down this burden someone else has placed on him. Naruto was already disillusioned with the world. Mito knew that forcing him would one day break him, so she did what she believed to be the best. She trained him to be happy. The world they lived in would make it hard for him to live his life on his own terms. It would be a struggle for him to find his place, and by the end of it, if he was content, if he was happy, he would already be great. Sadly, there were many like him unwittingly thrust into unending conflict, but for whatever reason, she wasn't sure, she couldn't help but believe in him. He was her catalyst to create a world where children wouldn't be reviled for carrying a burden, where people wouldn't be shamed for choosing their comrades over the success of a mission, where genocide wasn't given justification because the village was too strong and needed to be wiped out. She wasn't there to die by her people, and that was her greatest shame. Sometimes she could hear the voices of her kin asking where she was in their time of need. Her time was up and she was afraid of passing on to meet those she had outlived: her clan, her parents, her husband, her children, her grandchildren, and her little brother. She could still remember him following her around when he was little, wanting to spend time with her. Naruto resembled him greatly, as did Kushina. She only wished that Naruto's action, no matter what they might be, would allow her to face her clan and all those she had once sworn to protect but failed to do so. She had told this to Naruto, all of it. She might have been unkind to place the burden such knowledge put on him. It might have been cruel to place such expectations on him, robbing him of his innocence, but she could not deceive him. She could not lie to him, as she loved him too much. She loved him as if he was her own. She had tried to give him as much love and care as she could, but she still felt fear and unease that he would see her using him as a tool, that her affection for him was false. So it was understandable that she had been unbearably happy when the boy, her wonderful boy, had claimed to understand her. His answer as to why was simple as it can be: because he loved her too. And now here she was standing in front of him with only minutes left before she disappeared, and it seemed that Naruto, even after accepting the fact that she would be moving on, could not help himself as tears again started leaking from his eyes. Mito slowly extended her hand, letting it hover mere hair's breadth away from his cheek as if gently cupping it. Naru, remember what I told you. Live your life freely and don't be sad for too long. After all, your mother, and I along with all the people of Yuzu will be waiting for you to tell us about your life. But I won't see you again for a long time. Naruto hiccuped, rubbing his eyes furiously as if trying to stop himself from crying. True. You will be living a long and bountiful life, but consider this. When you pass on, our family will be together for eternity. And what have I told you about eternity? She said, gently coaxing him for answers, trying to take his mind off the situation even if for a brief moment. That eternity is so long that life would appear to pass by in a blink of an eye. Naruto mumbled. Right, as always. That's why you have to make the most of your time here and live a long life, otherwise you would run out of stuff to tell us. Mito said. Although she herself had only very brief clues about the afterlife, she knew her family would be waiting for her, and so she similarly would be waiting for her child. I will live an awesome life then, Naruto said with determination, his eyes blazing with resolve. But you have to keep your promise too, that you won't watch over me so I could tell you all about it firsthand. Mito chuckled softly. There it was, his odd request. He had made her promise that she won't watch over him, as he wanted to tell her all the stories of his life as she had told him hers. I'll stop myself from doing so, and I'll also try and stop Kushina too, but you know her, she might just sneak a peek, she stated teasingly, eliciting a watery chuckle from him. Sensing her strength fade, she felt it was time to say her goodbye. Remember, Naru, always stand up for yourself, and what you feel is right. Don't waste money, but don't be stingy either. If it makes you happy, I trust you to have good judgment, and when the truth comes out about your furry burden, don't let it define who you are. You are a very brave, kind and intelligent boy. That burden is only a very small part of you. Be proud, love you. Towards the end her words started getting lost in the void, but Naruto understood. Over the years he had come to appreciate her even more, as she had been the only one to equip him with the tools to survive. It was her honest confession that had solidified who he was as a person. If not for her, he would have died long ago, or worse, succumbed to his demon. And now it would seem that the world had finally decided to confront him on his status, and it was time for him to fight back. He looked around the area that was littered with blood and crystalline shards, toppled trees turned into husks, and remnants of mangled bodies lying not too far away. He had done well surviving till now, but the longer the fight went on, the more he was in danger of falling. 15 minutes before, Naruto looked towards the source of the sudden barrage of shuriken. The fact they had targeted him rather than all of them, or even one of his companions, could be concerning if it was intentional. Surrender, Konoha-nin. You are trespassing. It was the woman of the group that addressed them, all the while eyeing him up as if she was sizing him up as a threat. He could sense a feeling of caution from all of them. Naruto looked at her closely. Light blue hair done up in a spiky ponytail, pale skin, dark eyes, bright red lipstick. She looked to be the same age as Kurenai, maybe a year or two younger, in her mid to late 20s. He started cross-referencing anyone with similar characteristics in the bingo books, but couldn't find a match from his memory. He didn't try to get a closer look at the other four since they were obscured by the leaves and he couldn't see their faces. We didn't know this territory was under someone's control. Konoha has an understanding with the Sounds daimyo about shinobi activity. From our perspective, it would seem that you are illegally trespassing on our allies' territory. Izumo answered the question as if it was addressed to him. There was no need to give the enemy any indication to the team's composition. Then you are severely misinformed. Sound is under the leadership of the Otokichi, his authority given to him by the daimyo. So if you could please come with us, we can sort this mess out. She replied, still staring at Naruto, not even deigning Izumo important enough to look at. What a load of horseshit, Naruto thought. If they were as friendly as they tried to appear, they wouldn't have attacked first before announcing their presence, not to mention even if Naruto wasn't using his sensing ability, he could clearly feel a sense of malice coming from the other four shinobi surrounding the woman. She was focused on him, and that in itself was very worrying. He wasn't in the bingo book and frankly hadn't done any high-profile missions, so as far as anyone else was concerned, he was just a regular chunin. Do you seriously expect us to quietly follow you? Kotetsu asked, dropping all pretense of going with this charade. Why not? It would seriously save you some trouble. Come quietly, I don't wish to waste my time here, she said authoritatively. Sensing that the situation would surely devolve into a fight, Naruto spoke up, all the while calmly taking his hands out of his haori, letting it pool around his waist and tying the sleeves together. We'll have to decline. I don't make a habit of following strangers. He knew the fight would probably be rough considering the numbers disadvantage, and there was a slight chance that he might have to go all out, so if he could help it he would like to avoid ripping his haori. The shirt he was wearing he was perfectly fine with ruining, as it was a cheap one. He placed his right hand on the hilt of his sword as he started flooding yang chakra into his arms and legs. He didn't have the perfect control for it to not rip his body to shreds if he tried to sustain it for a longer period of time. He wasn't as skilled in this technique as Grandma Mito since it required more finesse and control, but he was still perfectly capable of using it as a surprise attack. He quickly dashed forward. Even to the trained eyes of the kunoichi it left her with little time to react. Naruto in a blur of red and orange reappeared near her position in midair. Burin tried to jump back as she felt several cuts run through her body. She only saw flashes of cold steel and all she could hear were blood-curdling screams. Naruto landed and jumped back to his previous position behind his teammates, who by now had taken a defensive stance while one of them was going through hand signs. He had failed to take out the apparent leader of the group. Burin quickly landed on the ground to see that the tree they had been standing on had been cut through in multiple places, along with two of the shinobi closest to her severed into vermilion ribbons. The brat had purposefully targeted her, no doubt trying to take her out first. It infuriated her that two of her underlings had died on her watch. She had only survived the assault because of her crystal armor. It was something she had been wearing beforehand as a precaution. She quickly dropped the armor covering her body as it had been damaged. It was already quite restricting. The boy was fast, but not to an extent where she would be unable to retaliate if she was alert. Her squad had been prepared to fight against the Jinchuriki, and all of them had been waiting for him to use the beast's foul chakra and failed to consider that he would attack them with such fierceness without it. It seems that the information they had on him was not complete. She had to take care of him before he became a threat to Orochimaru-sama's plans for raising Konoha. She saw a jet of water flying towards her position quite rapidly. Extending her hand, she used her bloodline to quickly start crystallizing the water into the shape of a dragon, and wrapped it around her in case there was something else coming towards her direction concealed in its shadow. Sensing that the enemy had been caught off guard by her maneuver and failed to press the advantage, she launched it towards the shinobi who had dared send a water jutsu towards her before they recovered. Crystal release, Raging Dragon. Naruto was already impressed that the woman had survived his attack, but this was absurd. Halfway through his strikes he had felt the feedback of his attacks to be wrong, and switched his target to the other two shinobi near her position. If he had a greater mastery of his sword he was certain he would have cut through her too. As he landed he felt mild pain shoot up through his body. A few more seconds and he would have torn his muscles. He felt regret at the thought that he had killed someone yet again. It was such a waste to claim life when if he were just a bit stronger he could have captured them. He quickly dismissed that thought as it was because he was weak that he shouldn't care for the lives he took, at least not now. He tried to regulate the pain his limbs were feeling as he saw Izumo already at the end of his four-hand seal sequence, and releasing a high-pressure jet of water from his mouth. He used his senses to determine where the other two surviving shinobi were. It seemed they were still recovering from running away from his initial assault. The kunoichi was obviously the major threat, and he supposed it would be better for them to take her out quickly. He prepared himself to go on and try engaging her in closed quarters. What he was not prepared for was the kunoichi to use some form of ninjutsu to turn the raging water into a pink crystalline dragon. He remembered seeing something similar just moments before with those shuriken he had cut before. Bloodline? He wasn't sure if it was a bloodline or not, as it could easily have been a hiden like the Yamanaka's mind technique, or something similar to his Uzumaki techniques, a specialized usage of yin or yang-natured chakra. He saw the dragon-like construct rush towards their position. Feeling that Izumo and Kotetsu would more than likely be unable to move out of the way, he quickly sent a burst of yin-natured chakra into the set of seals and the corresponding formula on his back, releasing 6 golden chains, ripping the back of his shirt to shreds. Adamantine chains? He quickly sent 2 of them forward, winding them around his 2 companions' waist and yanking them out of the way of the devastating jutsu that was carving out a path of destruction in its wake. Seeing the crystalline dragon slightly curve its path towards him, he had no choice but to grit his teeth and try to withstand its assault. Seeing no other choice, he flooded his sword with yang chakra to strengthen it. Iron in elemental nations was not of great quality, as generally contained too much carbon in it, which in return made the blades made forged from the material to be too brittle. He had hammered thousands of layers into his sword to take out the excess carbon, but even then, while the sword was very sharp, it still would easily chip if he cut anything incorrectly. He used the flat section of the blade above the ridgeline to try and stop the dragon from impaling him and felt his feet starting to drag. He tried to hold his ground by planting his feet using chakra, but soon his body started to hurt from the strain, so he released his hold, making the jutsu carry him back a great distance, and start digging into his body. Naruto used one of his chain to latch onto a tree branch and retracted it, carrying his body towards it, but the momentum of the crystal jutsu had been too great, causing him to swerve off and fly into another tree with enough force to topple it. He felt his insides churn from the force of the impact, and he could taste the coppery taste of blood filling his mouth, but thankfully it was a minor injury. The crystal dragon had been too strong, and yet he still wasn't completely sure whether it was a bloodline or not. Yin and yang chakra were very elusive in their nature, and unlike the elemental chakra, could produce a multitude of effects, like projecting corporeal objects similar to his chains. It could very well be that the technique she was using turned water release into those crystals, or it could be that it was a bloodline that could create crystals. Only with her using it more would he be able to figure it out. He stood up and quickly dashed back to the place where the conflict was taking place. He could sense that the 2 enemy shinobi had returned and were engaging Izumo and Kotetsu, while their leader the kunoichi was standing back, her attention drawn towards his direction. They were getting overwhelmed against the assault, and sooner or later would be out of commission. Until he knew more about the kunoichi's technique, it would be unwise to use water ninjutsu. He readied himself by using small amounts of his chakra. It provided a lesser boost in invigorating the body than the more potent yang one, and was a very basic technique every ninja not on his way to gain proficiency in taijutsu employed to perform superhuman feats. He was using this inferior technique than the better yang one because somehow his body was always in imbalance with itself, the yang chakra always being harder to control, as if he had an excess of it, which didn't quite make sense to him, as a person always had to have a balanced yin and yang to function correctly, otherwise they would be crippled. Kotetsu stood up from the sprawled position he had found himself in after he had been hurled out of the way by Naruto using his chains. He was very thankful to him for that, and he was also very much thankful for the fact that his vest had prevented the barbs from the chains from injuring him, and people said it was ugly and cumbersome. Idiots. He had not expected Izumo's jutsu to be turned towards them in such manner, and had failed to react to it. Quickly scanning his surroundings, he deduced that Izumo was fine, and was doing the same as him. He had seen Naruto try and face the jutsu head-on, and it had sent him flying out of sight. He was slightly worried for his safety, but with the knowledge of what Naruto was, he guessed he would join them in no time. He quickly made his way towards Izumo and took out his other weapon, his half of a pair, a kunai blade about a meter in length. Izumo, seeing this, pulled out his own from his sealing scroll, connecting his at the end with his kasari. They stood at an angle to each other as they watched the kunoichi, waiting for her to make a move. Usually they would start with Izumo using water jutsu to cover his assault, but seeing what she was capable of with the water technique, they decided to take a more reactionary approach and hold her off before Naruto came back. It wouldn't do to rush in when she still had reinforcements hiding. Oddly enough, the kunoichi didn't move to attack them. That was weird. She seemed to be looking towards the direction Naruto was sent flying. He stiffened when he felt people coming towards them. Do you see Uzumaki anywhere, Hibiki? The woman asked, addressing the newer arrivals. One of the opposing shinobi pulled their mask down. It was a woman, and since she was dressed in a similar fashion to the others, it had been hard to tell. Aside from the woman who had been addressing them, all of the others had their faces covered with black masks with a metal plate stitched to their foreheads with an inscription of a musical note engraved on it. They wore rather bulky gray garbs that obscured any indication if the person wearing them was a male or a female. The only thing remaining were the scarves wound around their neck in white and black patterns. Kotetsu very much doubted that they were trying to imitate a cow's hide. The kunoichi, Hibiki, using her fingers whistled a shrill sound and a moment later answered. He's about 100 meters in that direction, Girin-sama. He's still moving. She answered, pointing in the direction Naruto was thrown by the crystal technique. They know about Naruto. This isn't good. Izumo whispered quietly. Kotetsu could only nod at the statement. He wasn't sure how much information they had about Naruto, but if they knew of his status as the container of the Kyuubi and were still willing to confront them, then it only spelled trouble. Never mind the fact that Naruto had never shown any indication that he could use the Kyuubi's power effectively. Take care of them, Girin said abruptly to her two subordinates. Yes, Girin-sama. They answered before lunging towards their enemies, brandishing a kunai held in their dominant hand. As they clashed, it quickly became abundantly clear that Izumo and Kotetsu were easily superior to their opponents when fighting in combination with each other. Both of them had been in the same team for years and knew each other's moves like the back of their hand, so it would have been an easy fight if not for two major reasons. The first being that the enemy, while having similar physiques to their own, were physically superior to them, absurdly so. The second reason was that the enemy leader, Girin, had started hurling shuriken made out of crystals towards them, providing support to her subordinates. Dodging the hail of shuriken, Kotetsu discreetly formed a single hand sign using his left hand and cast a minor genjutsu on the area around him about a few meters in diameter. Its function was simple, to warp the sense of distance for the person looking from the outside. It would provide more breathing room for them. Izumo gritted his teeth as he felt his arm buckle from the pressure exerted by the small kunai of the enemy colliding with his larger one. He had to use both of his hands to stop his guard from breaking. He at least found solace in the fact that Girin was suddenly missing her shots, no doubt because of Kotetsu's technique. But he knew it wouldn't last for long. Either she would realize that she's caught in a genjutsu and break it, or she would start correcting the course of her shuriken. He knew the mechanics of working with genjutsu even though he was not proficient with them. If you are facing someone stronger than yourself, you have to layer your illusions, starting small and building them up in strength, otherwise your opponent would realize they are caught in one before breaking them. They were spared from figuring out their next move as Naruto came charging in and engaged the leader of the opposing group. Seeing that their opponents were distracted, both Izumo and Kotetsu ran away. They quickly stopped after leading their opponents a fair bit away from Naruto so he could focus on the kunoichi. They would have to try and work together if they wanted to win this fight. Izumo passed the other end of his chain to Kotetsu so he could link his end of the blade to it, joining both of their weapons together. They ran forwards and engaged both of their respective enemies, making sure to keep the chains slack. Weaving through attacks, Kotetsu waited for an opportunity to strike. Seeing the shinobi in front of him winding up his arm for an overhead swing, he flipped back towards his teammate, trusting him to protect his back, and went through a couple of hand signs rapidly to cast a genjutsu at the shinobi he had been fighting. Turning towards the kunoichi, he and Izumo ran towards her with their linked blades in hand. They moved around her, making sure to dodge her strikes, dancing in and out of her swings. Hibiki was getting frustrated with the situation. She couldn't use her jutsu when the two of the Konoha scum were sticking so close to her. She saw that her partner was walking around as if he was drunk and realized that he was under an illusion. Hideki, you idiot, you are caught in a genjutsu, she shouted towards the bumbling idiot that was her partner. Seeing the kunoichi momentarily distracted, Izumo and Kotetsu moved in and coiled their chain around her to bind her in position. Kotetsu tugged his end of the chain to keep her contained and signaled his partner to finish the job. Izumo stabbed his blade into the ground to help hold the kunoichi before pulling out a kunai to stab her. Seeing him advance, the kunoichi desperately built up her chakra, emptying more than half of her reserve in the process, and shrieked, sending out a powerful sound wave blasting him away. She maneuvered her hand to get a hold of the chain and started tugging. Izumo stood up dazedly and started making hand signs as quickly as he could, seeing that Kotetsu was kneeling and barely holding onto the kunoichi. He looked to be using chakra to hold his ground. As he reached his last hand signs, he felt his cheeks bulge as turbulent water filled his mouth. Water release, water bullet. Kotetsu watched as a single giant water bullet, courtesy of his companion, raced towards Hibiki and knew it was the end for her. Even if she didn't die, she would be incapacitated. He felt his relief evaporate as he heard the distinct mocking voice of their enemy. Crystal release, crystal wall. He watched the water bullet smash into the wall before exploding. He barely had the time to register Girin's presence when he felt a strong tug on his chain. Moments later, he was brutally slammed into the crystal wall. He felt his vision grow dark as white-hot pain shot up from his thigh. He had felt the pain numerous times in his career, so much so that even in his muddled state he knew his leg had been punctured. Moments earlier Naruto's side, seeing her trying to tag his teammates with her shuriken, Naruto rushed towards the kunoichi and even before reaching the range of his sword sent his chains towards her in varying curved paths trying to impale her with the bladed kunai-like ends attached to them. The kunoichi already sensing his movement went through several hand signs, crystal release, giant hexagonal shuriken conjuring a large jade-green crystal shuriken, resembling snowflakes, several meters in diameter throwing it towards him. The shuriken moved on the ground as if it was a wheel of a cart, coming to resemble a disc due to its rapid rotation easily pushing aside his chains. Naruto quickly jumped sideways and out of the way of the attack before he started rushing forward. It would seem that fighting at longer distances would be very disadvantageous to him. The notion quickly made clear as he saw from the corner of his eye the shuriken he had evaded cleaving through trees and showing no sign of stopping. He reached her and swung his sword expecting her to dodge the blow. Guren calmly created a set of blue blades around her forearm and blocked the strike using her left hand. She quickly thrust her other hand forward to stab him in the stomach. While Naruto was not expecting her to block his strike by seemingly creating weapons out of thin air, he wasn't so unskilled with his sword to be so easily subdued by someone, just because they were wielding weapons with both hands. He turned his body slightly to avoid the strike all the while twisting his blade so that the flat side of his sword came to rest on the edge of her amethyst blade. He moved his arm letting his sword skate forward and launched it towards her head. Guren's eye widened and she hastily ducked under the strike and quickly kicked from her position. Naruto jumped back before the kick could hit him and sent one of his chains to wrap around the offending leg before trying to drag the kunoichi towards him. Guren tried to summon her crystals around her leg to try and encase that weird chain and shatter it. The small spikes on the links of the chain were digging into her flesh, drawing blood. As soon as she tried molding her chakra around her leg and the chain, she felt it leave her, as if it had been siphoned out through the chain. She was already livid with the thought of being injured by the boy. Seeing no choice, she kicked the ground with her other leg, hurtling herself towards him, positioning herself in a manner so that she was facing him. She created a large blue lance around her arm that was several meters in length, easily towering her frame before lunging forward. Oddly, the technique seemed to take far more chakra to create than she had estimated. Crystal release, crystal lance. Seeing the gigantic cone of sharp crystal coming towards him, Naruto used the chain connecting him to the kunoichi to try and alter her path. It seemed that he was not quite successful as his opponent. Realizing that she was going to miss, she whipped her arm around in a sweeping motion. The lance hit Naruto in his midriff and shattered on impact, sending him flying through multiple trees. Fortunately for Guren, through this exchange it seemed that the chain binding her leg had loosened, and she had avoided being dragged along with Naruto. She landed on the ground and winced as she felt searing pain shoot up from her injured leg. She quickly encased her leg with crystals to make a makeshift splint for herself. It would seem that without using her crystal armor, it would be unwise for her to fight him in close range. Now that she had time to settle her thoughts before